My son gave me a $2.50 lottery ticket but gave his father-in-law a $20,000 trip to Dubai. But 1 week later, luck came to me and now he is begging. 57 missed calls. That is how many times my phone has lit up in the last hour. The name on the screen says Darnell, but I know better. It is panic calling. It is the desperation of a man who just realized the ground beneath his feet is actually a trap door, and I am the one holding the lever. He told me I should be grateful for the chance to dream with that scratch-off ticket. Well, today I am not dreaming. I am sitting in the leather chair of a high-rise law firm with a winning ticket worth millions and the legal power to foreclose on the very house Darnell is sleeping in. He wants to talk now. He wants to explain. But I think I will let it ring one more time. My name is Alonzo Freeman. I am 68 years old and I have calluses on my hands that are older than my son. For 40 years, I poured molten steel at the foundry, risking burns and broken bones so Darnell could have soft hands and a college degree. I lived on canned beans and discount bread so he could eat steak. I drove a rust bucket so he could drive a sedan. I thought I was raising a man who would understand the value of $1 and the weight of loyalty. Turns out I was just raising a bank account for someone else to drain. I am a simple man. I do not ask for much, just a little respect in the house I paid for. But as I found out last Sunday, respect is too expensive a gift for some people to give. The backyard barbecue was loud. Not the good kind of loud with deep belly laughs and Motown records spinning like my late wife Esther used to host. This was the jagged noise of clinking crystal glasses and forced cackling. It was the sound of people trying too hard to prove they were happy. I sat on a rusty metal folding chair near the garbage cans and the recycling bin. That was my designated spot, out of the way. Out of the frame of the photos Kimberly was constantly snapping for her social media. In the center of the patio sat Stanford Vance, Darnell's father-in-law. He was sprawled out on the plush beige outdoor sofa I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. Stanford was a man who wore sunglasses at dusk and spoke with a volume that demanded you listen even if he was saying nothing of substance. He held a cigar in one hand and a glass of scotch in the other. My scotch. The bottle I had been saving for a special occasion which Darnell had cracked open without asking because Stanford mentioned he was thirsty. I watched them from my metal island. My back was aching. The humidity was making my joints stiff, but nobody offered me a cushion. Darnell was running around refilling drinks and wiping down the table like a nervous waiter. He looked sweating and desperate. He was wearing a linen shirt that cost more than my monthly medication. Every time Stanford made a joke, Darnell laughed a second too long and a decibel too loud. It was painful to watch. My son, the man I taught to stand tall, was bending his spine into a question mark for this man who barely knew his middle name. Then came the moment for the Father's Day gifts. Darnell tapped his glass with a silver fork, calling for attention. He looked like he was about to announce a peace treaty. He cleared his throat and puffed out his chest. He called Stanford over first. Of course he did. Stanford did not even stand up. He just extended a lazy hand. Darnell presented him with a thick, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. It looked heavy, expensive. Stanford tore it open with the grace of a shark tearing into a seal. He pulled out the itinerary and let out a low whistle that made my hearing aid buzz. First-class tickets to Dubai, 7 nights at the Burj Al Arab, all expenses paid, private desert safari included. I felt the air leave my lungs. I did a quick calculation in my head. That trip was at least $20,000. $20,000. My hands gripped the edges of my folding chair. I felt the cold metal bite into my skin. Stanford roared with laughter. He stood up and slapped Darnell on the back so hard the boy almost stumbled. He called Darnell the son he never had. He said this was how a real man shows appreciation. Darnell beamed. He was glowing. He looked over at me, not with shame, but with a strange sort of defiance. His eyes were saying, "Look what I can do. Look how successful I am." Kimberly clapped her hands together. She kissed her father on the cheek and told him he deserved the world. She looked at the tickets and said it was a small token for everything Stanford had done. I sat there trying to remember what exactly Stanford had done besides criticize the paint color of the living room and drink my liquor. Then the applause died down. The air grew a little heavy. It was the moment they could not avoid. My turn. Darnell did not walk over to me. He did not make a speech. He stayed by the main table, standing next to Stanford like a bodyguard. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. He flicked it across the table. It slid through a puddle of condensation from a beer bottle and stopped near the edge. It was a scratch-off ticket and a quick pick lottery slip. Total value $2.50. The silence in the yard was absolute. Even the crickets seemed to stop chirping to witness the insult. I stared at the ticket. It was wet on one corner. Darnell cleared his throat and said, "Good luck, Pop." He said, "Who knows, maybe I would hit the big one and finally stop worrying about pennies." He said it with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Kimberly giggled. It was a sharp, cruel sound. She chimed in and said I should not spend it all in one place. She said at least a lottery ticket would not give me diabetes like a cake would. She looked at her father and they shared a knowing smirk. A look that said the old man is lucky we even acknowledge him. I looked at that ticket. Then I looked at Darnell. And suddenly I was not seeing a 32-year-old real estate agent in a linen suit. I was seeing him standing in my driveway last year with tears in his eyes begging me to help him. He had come to me desperate. He said he needed seed money for a massive business deal that would set him up for life. He said it was life or death. He needed cash, and he needed it fast. I did not have much liquid cash, but I had my truck, my 1978 Ford F-150. I had bought that truck the year Darnell was born. It was my pride. I kept the engine purring and the paint polished. It was the one thing I had kept for myself after Esther died. But my son needed me, so I sold it. I sold it to a collector for $25,000. I handed the cash to Darnell. He had hugged me and cried. He promised me he would double it in 6 months. I looked at the Dubai tickets in Stanford's hand. $20,000. The math hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. My truck money. The money I sacrificed my only joy for. It did not go to a business deal. It did not go to an investment. It went to this. It went to buying the affection of a man who looked down on us. Darnell had stripped me of my asset to clothe himself in a lie. He had sold my history to buy Stanford's approval. I looked at Darnell, and I saw the fear behind his arrogance. He knew. He knew that I knew. But he was betting on my silence. He was betting on the fact that I was Alonzo Freeman, the quiet man who never made a scene, the man who swallowed his pride to keep the peace. I slowly reached out and picked up the wet ticket. My hand was trembling not from age, but from a rage so hot it felt like molten steel running through my veins. I wanted to tear it up. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that I was the one who paid for the roof over their heads, but I did not. Stanford checked his gold watch and announced that the humidity was ruining his mood. He suggested they go downtown to that expensive Italian gelato place, the one that charges $12 for a scoop of ice cream. Darnell jumped up like a spring. He grabbed the car keys. Kimberly stood up and smoothed her dress. She looked at me and pointed to the table. She told me to make myself useful while they were gone. She said the ants would come if I did not bag up the trash. She said since I was living there rent-free, it was the least I could do. They did not ask if I wanted to come. They did not even say goodbye. They just walked out the gate laughing about camel rides and luxury suites. I was left alone in the backyard. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. I mowed every Tuesday. I looked at the mess they left. The half-eaten ribs, the empty bottles, the cream envelope on the table that Stanford had left behind because he knew Darnell would carry it for him later. I stood up, my knees popped. I grabbed a black trash bag and started clearing the table. I threw away the rib bones, I threw away the napkins, I threw away the illusion that my son respected me. I held the lottery ticket over the open trash bag. It was garbage. Just another piece of paper Darnell used to silence his conscience. I was about to let it drop. But then a breeze blew through the yard. It felt like Esther's hand on my shoulder. A small voice in the back of my head whispered to keep it. Not because I thought I would win, but because it was the receipt. It was the physical proof of my worth in this family. $2.50. I wiped the beer stain off the ticket with my thumb. I folded it carefully. I placed it in the breast pocket of my old flannel shirt right next to my beating heart. I finished cleaning the yard. I turned off the patio lights. And for the first time in my life, I went to bed not as a father, but as a stranger in my own house. I did not know it then, but that wet piece of paper was about to become the most expensive gift Darnell ever gave, and the most expensive lesson he would ever learn. The morning sun hit my face, but it brought no warmth. I woke up with a fire in my lower back. That familiar, sharp pain reminded me of 30 years spent bending over blast furnaces at the steel mill. My spine was a map of every double shift I worked to pay for this house. I needed my prescription refill. It was not a luxury. It was the only thing that allowed me to walk upright. I put on my Sunday best shirt even though it was a Monday, because a man should always look dignified when he handles his business. I drove my old sedan to the bank. It was the same branch I had been using since Darnell was in diapers. I walked up to the teller window. Mrs. Higgins was there. She was a kind woman with gray hair who always asked about my garden. I handed her a withdrawal slip for $50, just $50. Enough for the co-payment on my back medication and maybe a tank of gas. I waited for the familiar sound of the cash drawer opening, but it did not open. Instead, Mrs. Higgins frowned at her screen. She typed something again. She looked up at me over her glasses and her face was pale. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Mr. Freeman, I am afraid the transaction has been declined." I felt a cold shiver run down my neck. I laughed nervously. "That is impossible, Mrs. Higgins. I have over $20,000 in that savings account. It is the emergency fund I have been building since 1998. Please check again." She turned the screen toward me. Her eyes were full of pity. I hate pity. It feels worse than hate. She pointed to the balance at the bottom of the screen. $12.40. I stared at the number. My breath hitched in my throat. $12. That was not even enough to buy a decent lunch. I asked her where the money went. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. She printed out a transaction history. There it was, a transfer made yesterday afternoon via mobile banking. $20,000 sent to luxury travel agency. The memo line read, "Dubai Experience." The room spun. My knees buckled and I had to grab the counter to stay standing. Darnell. My name was on the account, but so was his. I had added him 5 years ago when I had my heart surgery, just in case something happened to me. I thought I was protecting him. I thought I was securing his future. I did not know I was handing him a loaded gun to shoot me with. I walked out of the bank without my medicine. The pain in my back was throbbing, but the pain in my chest was blinding. I drove home in a daze. Every stoplight felt like an eternity. That money was my blood and sweat. It was the nights I missed tucking him in bed because I was working overtime. It was the vacations I never took. It was the new shoes I never bought. When I walked into the house, Darnell was sitting on the living room sofa. He was eating takeout sushi, expensive sushi. The smell of raw fish and soy sauce filled the room. He did not even look up when I slammed the front door. He was watching a basketball game on the big screen TV that I bought him for his birthday last year. I walked over and snatched the remote from his hand. I turned off the TV. The silence in the room was sudden and heavy. Darnell sighed and looked at me with annoyance. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. "What is your problem, Dad?" I was watching that. I threw the bank statement on the coffee table. It landed right next to his tray of sushi. I asked him to explain. I asked him how he could steal my life savings. I asked him if $20,000 meant nothing to him. I expected him to panic. I expected him to apologize. I expected him to drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. But Darnell did not move. He just leaned back into the cushions. He looked at me like I was a child who did not understand how the world worked. He told me to relax. He said he did not steal it. He said he borrowed it. He said he needed to make a grand gesture to Stanford. He said Stanford Vance is a man of high standards, and if he wants to do business with him, he needs to show he plays in the big leagues. He said the Dubai trip was an investment in his future. He said once the deal with Stanford goes through, he will pay me back double. I felt the veins in my neck bulging. I told him that was my medicine money. That was my funeral money. I told him he had no right to touch it without asking. Darnell stood up then. He towered over me. He had my eyes, but he had none of my heart. He shouted at me. He said I was being selfish. He said I was an old man with one foot in the grave, so why did I need $20,000 sitting in a bank? He said I should be happy to help my son succeed instead of hoarding pennies like a miser. He said I was small-minded. He said that is why I was a laborer and Stanford was a mogul, because I was afraid to spend money to make money. His words hit me harder than any fist. Selfish. He called me selfish, the man who wore the same winter coat for 12 years so he could have brand new Nikes for school. I looked at him and I realized I did not know this person. This was not the boy I raised. This was a stranger shaped by greed and insecurity. I did not scream back. I could not. The betrayal was too deep for noise. I turned around and walked to my room. I heard Darnell turn the TV back on behind me. He cranked the volume up. He had already dismissed me. To him, I was just an annoyance, a problem to be managed. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. My room was small and simple, a stark contrast to the rest of the house, which Kimberly had decorated with overpriced vases and abstract art. I reached into my shirt pocket. My fingers brushed against the lottery ticket, the $2.50 gift, the insult. I pulled it out. It was crumpled and warm from my body heat. I turned on the bedside lamp. The yellow light cast long shadows on the wall. I looked at the ticket. It was a quick pick, 5 numbers and a Powerball. I held it in my hands and I felt a surge of pure hatred. This piece of paper represented everything Darnell thought of me: cheap, disposable, a joke. I raised my hands to tear it in half. I wanted to destroy it. I wanted to rip it into confetti and throw it in Darnell's face. I wanted to pack my bag and leave. But where would I go with $12 in my pocket? I was trapped. I was a prisoner in the house I paid for. My hands trembled. I stopped. The news on the small TV in my bedroom was ending. The lottery drawing was coming up next. I lowered my hands. I do not know why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was a tiny flicker of hope that refuses to die, even when you are at rock bottom. The announcer on the screen was a young woman with a bright smile. She looked too happy. She announced that the jackpot had reached a record high. She started reading the numbers as the balls dropped into the chute. The first number was 7. I looked at my ticket. 7. I felt nothing, just a coincidence. The second number was 14. My eyes narrowed. 14 was on the second line. The third number was 22. My heart skipped a beat, a small flutter in my chest. I sat up straighter. The fourth number was 35. I brought the ticket closer to the light. 35. It was there. The fifth number was 41. My breathing stopped. The room went silent. The sound of Darnell's basketball game in the living room faded away. The pain in my back vanished. There was only the ticket and the screen. And the Powerball. The red ball. The number that changes everything. The ball dropped. Number 9. I looked at the last digit on my paper. Number 9. I stared at the ticket. Then I looked at the screen, then back at the ticket. 7, 14, 22, 35, 41, and 9. I did not scream. I did not jump up and dance. I did not cry out to God. I sat perfectly still. I was a statue carved out of shock. A strange calmness washed over me. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. Outside my door, my son was eating sushi paid for with my life savings. He believed he had stripped me of my power. He believed I was a helpless old man dependent on his charity. He had no idea that in the span of 60 seconds the universe had just handed me a nuclear weapon. I folded the ticket. I did not crumple it this time. I folded it with the precision of a surgeon. I placed it inside my Bible on the nightstand, right between the pages of Psalms. I turned off the lamp. I sat in the darkness and listened to the sounds of my house. I heard Darnell laughing at something on TV. I heard Kimberly walking around upstairs in her high heels. They were loud. They were confident. They were clueless. I lay down on my bed. My eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. I touched the Bible. I knew I would not sleep tonight. Tomorrow I would not go to the bank to beg for $50. Tomorrow everything would change. But for tonight I let them have their laughter. It would be the last time they laughed at my expense. The silence in my room was heavy, but it was no longer the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a predator waiting for the sun to rise. I left my car in the driveway that morning. Driving the sedan felt too much like the man I was yesterday, and today I was becoming someone else. I walked 2 blocks to the bus stop. The number 42 bus rumbled up the street, spewing black smoke, just like it did 30 years ago when I rode it to the steel mill. I climbed the steps and paid my fare with exact change. The driver was a young woman who did not look at me. I sat in the back. The seat was hard plastic and the window was scratched, but I felt more at home here than I did in my own living room. I looked at the people around me, a nurse with tired eyes, a construction worker with drywall dust on his boots. These were my people. People who knew that $1 was earned with sweat, not with a signature. My pocket felt heavy. The lottery ticket was tucked inside my Bible, which was wrapped in a plastic grocery bag inside my coat. It burned against my ribs. I kept my hand over it, protecting it from pickpockets and bad luck. But the real threat was not on the bus. The real threat was in my pocket, vibrating against my hip. My phone started buzzing before we even hit the first stoplight. It was Darnell. I looked at the screen and let it go to voicemail. I stared out the window as the familiar streets of my neighborhood rolled by. We passed the corner store where Darnell used to buy candy. We passed the park where I taught him to throw a baseball. Every corner held a memory of the boy he used to be, and every buzz of the phone was a reminder of the stranger he had become. The phone vibrated again, and again, and again. By the time I reached downtown, the battery was getting warm. I walked into the building on 4th Street. It was an old brick building with a slow elevator that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I was not going to the lottery commission, not yet. I was going to see Saul Cohen. Saul and I went back 40 years. He was the union representative when I was just a line worker. He fought for our pensions when the company tried to cut them. He was a small man with wild white hair and a suit that always looked a size too big, but he had the heart of a pit bull. When I walked into his office, he was buried behind a mountain of paperwork. He looked up and smiled. His teeth were yellow from coffee, but his smile was genuine. It was the first honest smile I had seen in days. "Alonzo, you look like you have seen a ghost," he said. I sat down in the chair opposite his desk. I did not say a word. I just reached into my bag, pulled out the Bible, and took out the folded ticket. I slid it across the desk. Saul looked at it. He adjusted his glasses. He pulled up the winning numbers on his computer. He looked back at the ticket. Then he looked at me. The silence in the room was thick. "Is this real?" he asked softly. "It is real," I said. Saul let out a long breath. He leaned back in his chair and laughed. A loud, barking laugh. "You did it, Alonzo. You finally caught a break. $15 million. This changes everything. You can move to Florida. You can buy a yacht. You can buy this whole building." My phone buzzed again. It rattled against the wooden arm of the chair. It was a violent sound in the quiet office. Saul looked at the phone. "Your boy?" he asked. I nodded. "He does not know," Saul said. It was not a question. "He thinks I am at the pharmacy begging for a discount on my pills," I said. The phone stopped. Then it started again immediately. I picked it up. I did not answer. I just looked at the notification. 12 missed calls. 13. 14. I pressed the button to listen to the voicemail on speaker. Darnell's voice filled the room. It was fast and high-pitched. It was the voice he used when he was cornered. "Dad, where are you? Pick up the phone. I need you to come back home right now. There is a situation with the credit cards. I need you to sign a power of attorney for the rental property on Oak Street. I can use the equity to float us for a few months until the Dubai deal pays out. It is just a signature, Dad. Do not be stubborn. Pick up the phone." I ended the message. Saul looked at me with sad eyes. He knew about the rental property. It was the first house Esther and I bought. We kept it as a rental for income after we moved to the bigger house. It was the only asset I had left besides the house Darnell was currently living in. "He wants the Oak Street house," I said quietly. "He stole $20,000 yesterday, and today he wants the deed to the rental." The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. It was from Kimberly. I opened it and showed it to Saul. The text read, "If you do not answer the phone in 5 minutes, do not bother coming home for dinner. The kitchen is closed to people who do not contribute." Saul took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "That is low, Alonzo. That is lower than a snake's belly." 57, I said. What Saul asked. 57 missed calls in the last hour. I looked at the phone one last time. I watched the screen light up with Darnell's face, a photo taken 5 years ago when he graduated with his MBA. He looked so proud then. I was so proud then. I thought his education would make him a better man than me. I thought it would give him the tools to build a life. Instead, it just gave him better tools to dismantle mine. I looked at Saul. "I want to set up a trust," I said. Saul nodded, grabbing a yellow legal pad. "Smart. We can protect the identity. You can claim the prize anonymously through the entity. What do you want to call it?" I thought about Esther. I thought about how she used to cut Darnell's hair in the kitchen to save money. I thought about how she nursed him through the chicken pox. I thought about how she made me promise on her deathbed to always look out for him. I had kept that promise. I had given him everything. My truck, my savings, my dignity. But looking out for someone does not mean letting them eat you alive. Sometimes looking out for someone means teaching them that the fire burns if you touch it. Call it Esther's Justice LLC, I said. Saul wrote it down. His pen scratched loudly against the paper. Esther's Justice LLC. And the beneficiaries, he asked. Just me, I said. For now. And I want you to prepare an eviction notice. Not for the house I live in, but for the rental on Oak Street. But nobody lives there right now, Saul said. It is vacant between tenants. I know, I said. But Darnell is going to try to sell it or mortgage it behind my back. I want a lien on it. I want it locked down so tight that if he even looks at the deed, a lawyer jumps out of the woodwork. And I want you to buy the mortgage on the big house. Saul stopped writing. He looked up. You want to buy the debt on your own house. I want to be the one holding the leash, I said. If the bank owns the debt, they will just foreclose. If I own the debt, I can decide when the lesson begins. Saul smiled. It was a different smile this time. It was a sharp smile, a lawyer's smile. I like it, he said. It is aggressive. It is cold. It is necessary, I said. The phone started buzzing again. Call number 58. I did not look at it this time. I pressed the side button. I held it down. The screen went black. The buzzing stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was peaceful. It was the silence of a bridge that had finally burned down. I stood up. I felt lighter. The pain in my back was still there, but it felt distant now. I had a plan. I had a weapon. And I had $15 million. Saul stood up and shook my hand. His grip was firm. I will file the papers today, he said. By tomorrow morning, Esther's Justice will be a legal entity. By tomorrow afternoon, we will have the check. What are you going to do now? I picked up my hat. I am going to go back to the basement, I said. You are going back there, Saul asked. Why? You could go to the Ritz. I am going back because the show is not over yet, I said. They think they are dealing with a helpless old man. I want to see their faces when they realize the old man owns the stage. I walked out of the office. The elevator ride down felt faster than the ride up. I walked out onto the street. The sun was high in the sky now. It was a hot day, but I buttoned my coat. I had a secret to keep warm. I walked to the bus stop. I waited for the number 42. I was going back to the toxicity. I was going back to the insults and the cold food, but this time I was not bringing fear with me. I was bringing justice, and justice was going to be served cold. The bus dropped me off at the corner, and I walked the last 100 yards to my house. The sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was walking toward a house that I legally owned, but where I was treated like a trespasser. In my pocket, the paperwork for Esther's Justice LLC was folded neatly next to the lottery ticket. It was a shield made of paper, but it felt stronger than steel. When I reached the driveway, I stopped. My suitcase. The old brown leather suitcase that I had bought for my honeymoon with Esther 30 years ago was sitting on the front porch. It looked small and pathetic sitting there next to Kimberly's oversized potted ferns. Beside it were 2 black garbage bags filled with my clothes. They had not even bothered to pack them properly. They had just stuffed my life into trash bags like yard waste. I walked up the steps. The front door opened before I could reach for my keys. Kimberly stood in the doorway. She was wearing expensive workout clothes, the kind that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She held a green smoothie in one hand and blocked my path with the other. "You are back," she said. Her voice was flat. "We were wondering if you were going to show up." I looked at the bags. I asked her what this was. I asked her why my belongings were on the porch like I was being evicted. Kimberly took a sip of her smoothie. "We are making some changes, Alonzo. I need a space for my wellness journey. The guest room, your room. It has the best morning light. It is perfect for my yoga studio. I cannot align my chakras with your old mothball-smelling clothes in the closet. Yoga." She was kicking me out of my bedroom for yoga. I looked past her into the hallway. Darnell was standing there. He was holding a clipboard. He would not meet my eyes. He was studying the floorboards like they were the most interesting thing in the world. I asked where I was supposed to sleep. Kimberly pointed a manicured finger downward. "The basement is finished. Well, mostly finished. It is private. It is quiet. You will have all the space you need down there. And frankly, it is better for everyone." Stanford is coming to stay for a few days before the Dubai trip, and he needs the suite. We cannot have you shuffling around in the hallway disturbing him." I looked at Darnell. I waited for him to speak. I waited for him to say that this was madness, that I was his father, that I bought this house, that I paid the down payment, that I paid the mortgage for 10 years before transferring the deed to his name so he could build credit. Darnell finally looked up. He cleared his throat. He walked onto the porch and handed me a piece of paper from the clipboard. "We need to establish some ground rules, Dad," he said. His voice was shaky, but he tried to make it sound authoritative. "Living costs are going up. Electricity, water, food. Kimberly and I calculated the expenses. It is only fair that you contribute if you are going to stay here." I took the paper. It was a contract, a residential lease agreement, between landlord Darnell Freeman and tenant Alonzo Freeman. I read the terms. Monthly rent, $1,200. My pension check was exactly $1,250. They had done the math. They knew exactly how much I received every month. They were leaving me with $50. $50 to buy my medicine. $50 to live. I read further. The tenant agrees to perform household maintenance, including but not limited to laundry, lawn care, and garbage disposal. Failure to comply will result in immediate eviction. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a line for my signature. I looked at Darnell. I saw the greed in his eyes masked as practicality. He was not just taking my money. He was taking my dignity. He wanted to turn his father into a servant who paid for the privilege of scrubbing his toilets. He wanted to squeeze every last drop of value out of me before I died. Kimberly tapped her foot impatiently. "It is a fair deal, Alonzo. Try finding an apartment in this city for $1,200. We are doing you a favor." A favor. Taking 99% of my income and putting me in the cellar was a favor. I felt the anger rising in my chest again. But then I remembered the LLC. I remembered the eviction notice for the Oak Street rental that Saul was filing right now. I remembered that I was about to buy the mortgage on this very house. If I fought them now, if I screamed and tore up the paper, they would kick me out. And if they kicked me out, I could not watch them fall. I needed to be here. I needed a front row seat to the destruction of their arrogance. I needed to be close enough to see the fear in their eyes when the walls started closing in. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pen. It was a cheap plastic pen I got from the bank. I saw Darnell flinch. He expected me to yell. He expected me to throw a punch. He was ready for a fight. But I did not fight. I uncapped the pen. I pressed the tip against the paper. "I will sign," I said. My voice was calm. It was colder than the winter wind. Darnell blinked. "You will." I signed my name. Alonzo Freeman. The letters were sharp and jagged. I handed the clipboard back to him. I told him that I accepted his terms. I told him that from this moment on, I was not his father. I was his tenant. And as a tenant, I expected him to follow the law. Darnell looked confused. He took the clipboard and muttered something about it being for the best. Kimberly smirked. She looked victorious. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally broken the old man. "Grab your bags," she said. "You can use the side door. We do not want you dragging those dirty bags through the foyer." I picked up the heavy suitcase. My back screamed in protest, but I did not grunt. I picked up the garbage bags. I walked around the side of the house to the basement entrance. The door to the basement was swollen from humidity. I had to shoulder it open. A smell hit me immediately. Damp earth, mildew, and old oil. I flipped the switch. A single naked bulb flickered to life in the center of the room. It was not a finished basement. It was a concrete box. The walls were bare cinder blocks painted a peeling white. There was a small, high window that looked out at ground level where the weeds grew. In the corner there was a rusty cot with a thin mattress. I dropped my bags and walked to the far wall. There was a workbench there. It was covered in dust now, but I recognized it. This was my old workbench. I ran my finger through the dust. Memories flooded back. This was where I taught Darnell how to fix a flat tire. I could still see him as a 10-year-old boy with grease on his nose holding a wrench that was too big for his hands. "Dad, look, I fixed it," he had said. He was so proud. He looked at me like I was Superman because I knew how to make things work. I stood there in the damp silence. The ghost of that little boy was standing next to me. I wanted to tell that ghost to run. I wanted to tell him that he would grow up to be a man who would force his father to sleep in the very spot where he learned to be a man. The basement was cold. It seeped into my bones. This was my new reality. A cot, a concrete floor, and a landlord who used to be my son. I sat down on the cot. The springs squeaked loudly. It smelled of must. I looked around at the shadows. They had put me in the dark to forget about me, to erase me. But they forgot one thing. Darkness is where you develop film. Darkness is where the picture becomes clear. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a sharp, sudden sound in the quiet room. I pulled it out. The screen was bright in the dim light. It was a notification from the bank app I had set up with Saul. The transfer from the lottery commission had gone through. I stared at the numbers. 1500000. $15 million. The blue light from the screen illuminated my face. I looked at the moldy walls. I looked at the water stains on the ceiling. I listened to the sound of Darnell and Kimberly walking around upstairs. I could hear their footsteps directly above my head. They were walking on top of me, literally. I let out a small laugh. It was a dry, raspy sound. "Enjoy the view from up there," I whispered to the ceiling. "Enjoy your yoga room. Enjoy your Dubai trip, because the ground beneath your feet does not belong to you anymore." I lay back on the thin mattress. I did not unpack. I did not need to. I was not going to be down here for long. But Darnell was. When I was done with him, this basement would be the only roof he could afford, and by then he would wish he had treated the tenant in the basement with a little more respect. I turned off the phone screen. The darkness returned. But this time I was not afraid of it. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a week, I slept like a baby. I slept the deep, peaceful sleep of a man who holds the keys to the kingdom while the kings are partying on a sinking ship. The white waiter jacket was tight across my shoulders. It smelled of cheap starch and the closet of a costume rental shop. Kimberly had tossed it onto my cot an hour ago. She told me that if I was going to be living under their roof and eating their food, I needed to make myself useful. Tonight was Stanford's farewell party before his grand trip to Dubai. They had invited 30 people, business partners, neighbors I had never spoken to, friends who only liked Darnell because he picked up the check, and I was the help. I stood in the corner of the living room holding a silver tray filled with crystal flutes of champagne. The same living room where I used to bounce Darnell on my knee was now filled with the roar of fake laughter and the clinking of expensive jewelry. My back ached. The pain was a dull throb that radiated down my left leg, but I stood straight. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hunch over. I was a statue of servitude, invisible, silent. Stanford was holding court by the fireplace. He was wearing a tuxedo that strained against his midsection. He held a cigar in one hand and a glass of my best cognac in the other. He had opened the bottle without asking. It was a vintage I had saved for my 50th anniversary with Esther. Now it was sliding down the throat of a man who did not know the difference between cognac and gasoline. Darnell was hovering around him like a moth drawn to a flame. He looked desperate. His smile was too wide. His eyes were darting around the room, checking to make sure everyone was having a good time. He wanted to be Stanford so badly it was painful to watch. He wanted the swagger. He wanted the attention. He did not realize that Stanford was not a king. He was a court jester wrapped in silk. I walked through the crowd offering drinks. Most people did not even look at me. I was just a floating hand with a tray. But then Stanford saw me. His eyes lit up with a malicious gleam. He waved me over with his cigar. "Alonzo, come here," he bellowed. The room went quiet. Conversation stopped. 30 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I walked over slowly. I kept my face blank. I did not frown. I did not smile. Stanford threw an arm around Darnell's shoulder and pointed at me with his glass. "Look at this, folks," Stanford announced. His voice was thick with liquor. "This is what I love about America. You have Darnell here, a rising star in real estate, a man of vision. And then you have his father, good old Alonzo, a man who spent 40 years in a factory, and now look at him, still serving, still working with his hands." A few guests chuckled nervously. Darnell turned red. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a choke. "It is just the way the world works," Stanford continued. "Some people are born to lead and some are born to serve. It is in the DNA, right, Alonzo? You are happy to help out, right? It gives you a sense of purpose." I looked at Stanford. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the way he gripped my son's shoulder like he owned him. "I am happy to do whatever is necessary for my family," I said. My voice was low and steady. It cut through the room like a cold draft. Stanford laughed loudly. He slapped his thigh. "See? That is a good attitude. A simple man with simple pleasures. Now fetch me a refill, old-timer. This glass is empty." I took his glass. I placed it on my tray. I did not shake. I walked away toward the kitchen. As I turned, I saw Kimberly. She was standing by the window sipping wine. She caught my eye and smirked. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed seeing the man who owned the house reduced to a servant in it. I went into the kitchen. I set the tray down on the granite island. My hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from rage. I wanted to smash every glass in the house. I wanted to burn the white jacket. But I took a deep breath. I reminded myself of the plan. I reminded myself of the bank account balance, $15 million. I could buy Stanford's life 10 times over. I refilled the drinks. I walked back out, but this time I did not circulate. I stood near the pillar behind the sofa where Stanford and Darnell were sitting. They thought I was invisible. They thought I was just furniture. So they talked. Stanford leaned in close to Darnell. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, but my hearing aid picked up every syllable. "Listen, son," Stanford said. "Dubai is going to be fun, but the real money is right here. I have an opportunity that I have been saving for you." Darnell's ears perked up. "What is it, Dad?" he asked. "Sunny Palms," Stanford said. I froze. Sunny Palms. It sounded like a retirement community or a cheap motel. "It is a development project on the west side," Stanford whispered. "Luxury condos. Retail space. The city just approved the zoning. I know the developer. He is looking for a few select investors to get in on the ground floor before the public offering. We are talking about a 300% return in 6 months, Darnell." 300%. Darnell's eyes widened. He licked his lips. "That sounds amazing." "It is a gold mine," Stanford said. "But the window is closing. I am putting in $500,000 myself. I told the developer you were good for it. I told him my son-in-law is a player." "How much?" Darnell asked. His voice was faint. 200,000, Stanford said. "Just the buy-in. You get the equity share. Once we break ground, you can flip it for double. But I need the cash in the escrow account by noon tomorrow, before I get on that plane." I watched Darnell deflate. I knew his finances better than he did. He did not have $200,000. He did not have $2,000. He was maxed out. "I do not have that kind of liquidity right now," Darnell whispered. "The market has been slow." Stanford pulled back. He looked disappointed. He looked at Darnell like he was a stain on his shirt. "Oh, I see. I thought you were serious, Darnell. I thought you wanted to sit at the big table. If you are not ready, I can call my other contacts. It is a shame, though. I wanted to keep this in the family." The manipulation was clumsy but effective. Darnell panicked. He saw Stanford's approval slipping away. He saw the illusion of his success crumbling. "No, wait," Darnell said. He grabbed Stanford's arm. "I can get it. I can get the money." "How?" Stanford asked. "The house," Darnell said. He looked around the room to make sure no one was listening. He did not look at me standing 5 feet away. "I have equity in this place. A lot of it. I can get a hard money loan. Short term. High interest, but if the return is 300%, it does not matter." Stanford smiled. It was the smile of a wolf watching a lamb walk into the slaughterhouse. That is the spirit, son. That is how real businessmen think. You leverage your assets. You make your money work for you. You get that money to me tomorrow, and we will toast to our fortune in Dubai. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Darnell was going to mortgage the house. My house. The house I had paid off with 30 years of sweat. He was going to gamble it on a phantom project just to please this con artist. I turned around and walked back to the kitchen. I put the tray down. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my cheap waiter pants. I opened the messaging app. I found Saul Cohen's number. My fingers flew across the screen. "I need you to look up a development called Sunny Palms, West Side. Find out who the owner is. Find out if it is for sale." I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I stared at the phone. Outside the kitchen door, the party was getting louder. Someone dropped a glass. Laughter erupted. The phone buzzed. It was Saul. I know the project. It is stalled. The original developer ran out of money. It is sitting in bankruptcy court. The bank is looking to unload the land for pennies on the dollar. I typed back, "Buy it." Saul replied immediately. "Excuse me." I typed again. My thumbs pressed hard against the glass. "Buy it all. I want the land. I want the permits. I want the rights. Use the LLC. Offer them cash. Close the deal tomorrow morning before noon." Saul replied, "It will cost $2 million cash." "Are you sure?" I looked through the kitchen doorway. I saw Darnell shaking Stanford's hand. I saw the look of relief on my son's face. He thought he had saved his reputation. He thought he was about to become rich. He had no idea he was shaking hands with the devil. I typed one last message to Saul. "Do it. I want to own the dirt they are standing on." I put the phone back in my pocket. I picked up a bottle of wine. I smoothed the front of my white jacket. I walked back into the party. I approached Stanford and Darnell. I poured wine into Stanford's glass. "Thank you," Alonzo Stanford said without looking at me. "You are a good man. Useful." I poured wine into Darnell's glass. He looked up at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. He knew he was about to risk the roof over his father's head. But then he looked at Stanford, and the guilt vanished. He was weak, and weakness costs money. "Enjoy the wine," I said softly. I walked away. I had just spent $2 million via text message. I had just bought the very trap they were trying to set for me. Tomorrow, Darnell would drain the equity from this house. He would hand it to Stanford, and Stanford would try to invest it in a project that I already owned. The collision was coming. I could feel it in the air like a coming storm. And for the first time all night, the pain in my back disappeared. I stood tall. I was not a waiter. I was the owner of the restaurant, and I was about to serve them a dish they would never forget. The sound of a son betraying his father is quieter than you might think. It is not a gunshot. It is not a scream. It is the soft click of a metal lockbox opening in the middle of the night. I lay awake on my cot in the basement listening to the footsteps above my head. I knew exactly which floorboard squeaked near the closet in the master bedroom. I had fixed that floorboard when Darnell was 5 years old, but the wood had warped over time just like the boy had. It was 2 a.m. Darnell thought I was asleep. He thought the old man in the cellar was snoring away his misery. But I was wide awake. I stared at the water stains on the concrete ceiling and I visualized his movements. He was opening the closet door. He was reaching up to the top shelf behind the winter blankets. He was pulling down the fireproof box that held the most important documents of our lives. Inside that box was the deed to this house. The deed that I had worked 3 jobs to secure, the deed that represented safety and legacy. And next to it was the deed to the Oak Street rental, which I had already protected with a lien. But Darnell did not want the rental tonight. He wanted the big prize. He wanted the house we were sleeping in. I heard the heavy thud of the box hitting the carpet. I heard the rustle of papers. He was looking for the clean, heavy bond paper with the official county seal. He needed it to prove collateral. He needed it to get a hard money loan because no reputable bank would lend him $200,000 in 24 hours. My phone buzzed silently against my chest. It was a text from the private investigator I had hired through Saul. He was parked down the street. The text read, "The subject is leaving the house, heading towards downtown." I knew where he was going. There is a place on 9th Street called Quick Capital Solutions. It is not a bank. It is a shark tank with fluorescent lights. They lend money to desperate people at predatory interest rates. They do not care about credit scores. They care about assets. If you have a house, they have a check. And if you miss a payment by 1 hour, they own your house. I could have gone upstairs. I could have stopped him. I could have grabbed his wrist and told him that he was about to sign his death warrant. I could have told him that Stanford Vance was selling him a lie and that the Sunny Palms project was already owned by me. I could have saved him. But a savior is not what Darnell needed right now. He needed a mirror. And sometimes the only way to see your own reflection clearly is when you are sitting in the rubble of your own life. I rolled over and typed a message to Saul Cohen. "He is moving. Be ready to intercept the note." Saul replied instantly. "We are monitoring the Lender S database. As soon as the lien is recorded, we will buy it. It will cost a premium." I typed back, Pay it. Pay whatever they want. I want to be the one holding the paper. I waited. The hours ticked by slowly in the damp darkness. I thought about the first day I brought Darnell home to this house. He was wrapped in a blue blanket. Esther was so happy she cried. She walked through every room whispering prayers into the walls, asking God to bless this home and the child who would grow up in it. Now 32 years later, that child was selling those walls to buy the approval of a man who treated him like a wallet. The sun began to rise, casting a gray light through the small basement window. I heard Darnell's car pull into the driveway. The engine sounded aggressive. He slammed the car door. He stomped into the house. I checked my phone. A new email from Saul. Attached was a PDF document. Assignment of mortgage. Transferring all rights and interests from Quick Capital Solutions to Esther S. Justice, LLC. I opened the document. My eyes scanned the numbers. Darnell had borrowed $220,000 against the house. The interest rate was 15%. The term was 30 days. It was a suicide loan. He had signed it with a forged power of attorney, or perhaps he had used his status on the title that I had foolishly granted him years ago. It did not matter how he did it. What mattered was that he had done it. And now he did not owe the money to the loan shark. He owed it to Esther S. Justice, LLC. He owed it to me. I heard shouting upstairs, happy shouting. Darnell was on the phone. I could hear his voice vibrating through the floorboards. I got it, Dad. I got the liquidity. It is happening. I am transferring it to your escrow account right now. He was talking to Stanford. He sounded high on adrenaline. He sounded like a man who had just won the Super Bowl, not a man who had just placed his family in the crosshairs of foreclosure. I stood up and stretched. My back cracked. I put on my work clothes, a pair of stained coveralls and heavy boots. If I was going to be the tenant, I would play the part. I walked up the basement stairs and entered the kitchen. Darnell was standing by the coffee machine. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and his skin was gray, but he was grinning like a maniac. He held his phone up, showing me a transfer confirmation screen. $200,000 sent. Boom, he said. Just like that. I walked past him to get a glass of water. I moved slowly. I kept my head down. "Good morning, Darnell," I said. "You look like you had a long night." He laughed. A jagged, nervous sound. "You have no idea, old man. Big moves. Big business. While you were sleeping down there in the dark, I was securing the family legacy." "Legacy," I repeated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "Is that what you call it?" He sneered at me. He poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Best Boss." "You would not understand," he said. "You spent your life punching a clock. You saved pennies. I am making millions. Stanford just confirmed the receipt. The Sunny Palms deal is locked. In 6 months, I will be able to buy 10 houses like this one." I took a sip of water. The water was cool, but my blood was boiling. "Did you read the fine print, Darnell?" I asked softly. He waved his hand dismissively. "Details are for lawyers. Vision is for leaders. Stanford says this is a sure thing." Stanford says. The name hung in the air like a bad smell. Just then, Kimberly walked in. She was wearing a silk robe. She saw the look on Darnell's face and she knew. "Did you do it?" she asked, breathless. Darnell nodded. He grabbed her by the waist and spun her around. "We are in, baby. We are officially investors. The wire just cleared. Stanford is taking us to the top." Kimberly shrieked with delight. She kissed him all over his face. "Oh, honey, I knew you could do it. I knew you would find the money. Now we can finally get that Mercedes I wanted." They danced around the kitchen. They danced around the father who had paid for the floor they were dancing on. They danced around the reality that was about to crush them. I finished my water. I rinsed the glass and placed it in the drying rack. "I am going to mow the lawn," I said. Darnell stopped dancing. He looked at me with pity. "Yeah, you do that, Dad. Keep the grass short. We might have potential buyers coming by to look at the property soon." I froze. "Buyers? What do you mean?" I asked. Darnell shrugged. "Well, once the Sunny Palms money hits, I am thinking we upgrade. This place is old. It smells like old people. We need something modern, something that reflects our new status." He was planning to sell the house. My house. He was going to take the profit from his imaginary deal and erase the last trace of me and Esther from this earth. I nodded slowly. "I see," I said. I walked out the back door. The morning air was fresh. The sun was shining on the overgrown grass. I walked to the shed and pulled out the lawnmower. It was an old machine, loud and smoky. I pulled the cord. It roared to life, but I did not start mowing immediately. I pulled my phone out one last time. I opened the banking app for the LLC. I saw the deduction for the purchase of the debt. It was a large number, but I had plenty left. Then I opened the email from Saul again. I zoomed in on the signature line of the loan assignment. Creditor Esther S. Justice, LLC. I looked back at the house. I saw Darnell and Kimberly in the kitchen window. They were toasting with orange juice. They looked so happy, so confident, so safe. They did not know that the ground had already shifted. They did not know that the clock had started ticking. 30 days. That was the term of the loan Darnell had signed. But there was a clause, a default clause. If the collateral was deemed to be at risk, or if the borrower provided false information, the lender could call the loan immediately. Darnell had lied on the application. He had stated that the property was his primary residence and that there were no other occupants. He had failed to mention the tenant in the basement, me. I put the phone away. I gripped the handle of the lawn mower. The vibration traveled up my arms. It felt good. It felt like power. I pushed the mower into the tall grass. The blades sliced through the green stems. Let them celebrate today. Let them dream of their millions and their new mansions. Let Stanford board his plane to Dubai with my son S. stolen money in his pocket. Because when he lands, he's going to find out that his project is dead. And when Darnell wakes up from his delusion, he's going to find out that his landlord is not a stranger. I am the landlord. I am the bank. I am the judge and the jury. And as I cut the grass in the yard that I had tended for 40 years, I made a promise to the woman whose name was on my company. Justice is coming, Esther, and it is going to be loud. It is midnight in Chicago, but the sun is already blazing over the Persian Gulf. I am lying on a thin mattress in a damp basement, smelling the scent of old oil and concrete. But in my mind, I am standing in the lobby of the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai. I can see it clearly, the gold leaf on the pillars, the fountain that shoots water 100 feet into the air, the smell of expensive perfume and limitless wealth. And in the center of that opulence stands Stanford Vance. He is wearing a linen suit that cost more than my first car. His wife is wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a Louis Vuitton bag. They look like royalty. They feel like royalty. They have just stepped out of a limousine that Darnell paid for. They are walking up to the reception desk, ready to check into the royal suite. A suite that costs $20,000 a week. I check my watch. It is 12:05 a.m. That means it is 9:05 a.m. in Dubai, right on schedule. I imagine Stanford slapping a credit card onto the marble counter. It is a heavy card, a Platinum American Express. It has his name on it, but it is linked to my credit history. Darnell added him as an authorized user 3 years ago without telling me. He said it was for emergencies. Apparently, a 7-star vacation is an emergency. I close my eyes and I smile in the darkness. Yesterday afternoon at 4:59 p.m., exactly 1 minute before the bank closed, I made a phone call. I spoke to a very helpful customer service representative named Sarah. I told Sarah that I had lost my wallet. I told her that I was worried about identity theft. I told her to freeze everything. Every card, every authorized user, every transaction. Sarah was very efficient. She clicked a button. And just like that, the plastic card in Stanford's hand turned into a worthless piece of plastic. I can hear Darnell walking around upstairs. He is pacing. He is waiting for the call. He is waiting for Stanford to tell him how amazing the suite is. He is waiting for the validation that he craves like a drug. The phone rings. It is a jarring sound in the quiet house. It is not the happy ringtone Darnell has for his friends. It is the default ringtone. Urgent, loud. I hear Darnell answer, "Hey, Dad, did you land? How is the—" He stops. I cannot hear Stanford's voice, but I can hear the tone. It is a scream. It is the sound of a man who has just been publicly humiliated in front of sheiks and billionaires. I can imagine the scene in the hotel lobby, the receptionist typing, the frown, the whispered apology. "I am sorry, sir, this card has been declined. The prompt says it has been reported lost or stolen." Stanford would argue. He would shout, "Do you know who I am? Try it again." They would try it again. Declined. Then the security guards would step forward. In a place like the Burj Al Arab, they do not tolerate scenes. They do not tolerate fraud. 2 large men in dark suits would ask Stanford to step aside. They would ask him for another form of payment, and that is the beauty of it. Stanford does not have another form of payment. He is a fraud. He has been living off Darnell's line of credit for years. Upstairs, Darnell's voice rises to a panic. What do you mean, declined? That is impossible. There is a $50,000 limit on that card. It must be a system error. Put them on the phone. There is a pause. Darnell listens. Dad, please calm down. Do not yell. I will fix it. I promise. Just give me 5 minutes. Do not leave the hotel. They are threatening to call the police. Oh my God. Darnell hangs up. I hear him running. He is running to his laptop. He is trying to log into the banking portal, but he cannot, because I changed the password too. The silence upstairs is heavy. It is the silence of a man realizing the walls are closing in. Then I hear the footsteps. Thud, thud, thud. He is coming to the basement door. He tries the handle. It is locked. I installed a deadbolt yesterday. A tenant has a right to privacy after all. He pounds on the door. It shakes in the frame. Dust falls from the ceiling. Dad. Dad, wake up. I do not answer. I lie perfectly still with my hands folded behind my head. Dad, open the door. It is an emergency. Stanford is stuck in Dubai. The card is not working. The bank says you reported it stolen. He bangs harder. He is kicking the door now. Dad, answer me. You have to call the bank. You have to unfreeze it. They are going to arrest him. He is screaming at me, Dad. He says I set him up. I look at the ceiling. I wonder if Stanford is sweating in his linen suit. I wonder if his wife is crying. I wonder if they regret ordering the champagne before the card cleared. Darnell's voice breaks. He is crying. Dad, please, I know you are awake. Why are you doing this? That card is linked to your credit score too. If he defaults, it hurts you. He is wrong. It does not hurt me. My credit score is irrelevant now. I have $15 million in a trust fund. I could buy the bank if I wanted to. Open the door. You are killing me, Dad. You are destroying everything I worked for. Worked for. That is a funny phrase. Darnell never worked for that trip. He stole for it. He leveraged my house for it. He betrayed me for it. I reach over to the small table beside my cot. There is an old record player there, one of the few things Kimberly allowed me to keep because she thought it looked vintage and trashy. I pick up a record, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I place the needle on the vinyl. The crackle of the static fills the room. Then the trumpet starts, smooth, melancholic, cool. I turn the volume up. The music fills the concrete box. It drowns out the sound of Darnell's fists on the door. It drowns out his sobbing. It drowns out the name Stanford. Dad, stop the music. Dad, listen to me. I close my eyes. I let the jazz wash over me. A credit card is a powerful thing. It is a key that opens doors, but it is also a leash. And tonight I just yanked the leash. Darnell screams one last time. It is a primal scream of frustration, then silence. He slides down against the door. I can hear him slumping to the floor on the other side. He is sitting there in the dark, just like me. But I am comfortable in the dark. I lived in the dark for years so he could stand in the light. Now it is his turn to learn what the dark feels like. I drift off to sleep listening to the trumpet. I sleep soundly. I sleep knowing that halfway across the world, Stanford Vance is sitting on a suitcase in a hotel lobby waiting for a rescue that is never coming. And upstairs, my son is staring at a locked door, realizing that for the first time in his life, Daddy is not going to fix it. The vacation of a lifetime lasted exactly 48 hours. I heard the taxi pull up to the driveway at 6 in the morning. There was no limousine this time. There was no laughter. The car doors slammed with the violence of a gunshot. I watched from my basement window as Stanford Vance marched up the walkway, dragging his expensive suitcase like a body he wanted to bury. He looked like a man who had not slept. His linen suit was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His face was a map of fury and humiliation. Darnell trailed behind him carrying 3 bags and looking like a dog that had just been kicked. He stumbled on the front step, almost dropping a bag, and Stanford turned around and barked something at him that made Darnell flinch. I lay on my cot and listened to them enter the house. The heavy footsteps on the floorboards above me told the whole story. They stomped around like angry giants. I heard Kimberly running down the stairs to greet them. Her voice was high and confused, asking why they were back so soon. Stanford did not answer her. He went straight to the liquor cabinet. I heard the clink of glass against glass. At 6 in the morning, he was already pouring a drink. I did not need to press my ear to the ceiling to hear the conversation that followed. Stanford did not care who heard him anymore. He was screaming about humiliated dignity and declined cards. He told Darnell that he had been forced to put $50,000 on his own personal emergency card to pay the hotel bill and the penalty fees for early cancellation. He lied, of course. Stanford did not have $50,000. He probably called a loan shark or begged a favor from someone dangerous, but he wanted Darnell to feel the weight of the debt. He told Darnell that he owed him. Darnell was apologizing. He was begging. He said it was a bank error. He said the system was down. Stanford cut him off. He said there is only one way to fix this mess. Sign the papers for Sunny Palms. Lock in the investment. We need that commission. 3 hours later, I was summoned upstairs to make coffee. The living room looked like a war room. The dining room table was covered in blueprints and contracts. Stanford had regained some of his composure. He had slicked back his hair and put on a fresh shirt, but his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped rat. He looked desperate. He needed money, and he needed it now. Darnell sat opposite him, holding a fountain pen. His hand was shaking so bad he could hardly keep it on the paper. He looked gray. The stress of the Dubai incident and the sleepless flight back had drained the life out of him. Stanford tapped the document with his thick finger. Sign it, Darnell. This is the only way out. We double your money in 6 months. You pay off the house. You pay me back for the hotel. We forget this nightmare ever happened. You have already sent the deposit. The $200,000 is sitting in the escrow account. If you do not sign the final commitment letter today, we lose the deposit. Do you hear me? We lose everything. Darnell looked up. His eyes were wide with panic. But Dad, are you sure this is safe? The bank issues yesterday got me worried. Maybe we should wait a week. Stanford slammed his hand on the table. The coffee cups rattled. Wait for what? To be poor. To be a loser like your father. Do you want to end up living in a basement? I am offering you a lifeline. I am offering you the keys to the kingdom. Sign the paper. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding the coffee pot. I watched my son. I saw the conflict in his face. He knew something was wrong. His gut was screaming at him to stop, but his need for approval was stronger than his survival instinct. He looked at Stanford and he saw the father figure he wished I was. A rich, powerful man who commanded rooms. He did not see the con artist who was about to bleed him dry. Darnell lowered the pen to the paper. The tip touched the signature line. I watched the ink begin to bleed into the paper. Then the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, clear sound that froze the room. Darnell jumped. Stanford cursed. Ignore it, Stanford growled. Sign the damn paper. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time, insistent. I walked to the door. I moved slowly. My waiter uniform was wrinkled, but I held my head high. I opened the door. Saul Cohen stood there. He was wearing a gray trench coat and holding a leather briefcase. He looked like a storm cloud that had decided to wear a suit. He looked past me and saw the men at the table. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Who is it?" Stanford yelled from the dining room. "Get rid of them, Alonzo." Saul walked past me. He did not ask for permission. He walked straight into the dining room and placed his briefcase on the table right on top of the blueprints. "My name is Saul Cohen. I am an attorney." Darnell looked confused. He looked at Stanford. Stanford stood up, his face turning a deep shade of red. "Who are you?" "I did not call a lawyer. Get out of my house." Saul ignored him. He looked at Darnell. "Mr. Freeman, I assume. I am here to represent the current owner of the Sunny Palms development site. I am here to inform you that any contracts regarding this property are null and void." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Darnell dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell onto the floor. "What is he talking about, Dad?" Darnell asked. His voice was a whisper. "You said you knew the developer. You said you had the exclusive rights." Stanford started to sweat. He loosened his tie. "He is lying. He is trying to cut us out of the deal. I have an option on this land. I have the paperwork right here." Saul opened his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like the cocking of a gun. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table toward Darnell. "Actually, Mr. Vance, your option expired 3 days ago. You failed to secure the financing in time. And while you were in the air flying to Dubai, my client purchased the entire subdivision. Cash. The deed was recorded this morning." Darnell picked up the paper. His hands were trembling violently now. He read it. He read it again. bought by Esther S. Justice, LLC. He looked up at Saul. Who is Esther S. Justice? That is a private investment firm, Saul said smoothly. And they have instructed me to tell you that they have no interest in partnering with Mr. Vance. In fact, they have issued a cease and desist order against him for soliciting investments on property he does not own. Darnell turned his head slowly toward his father-in-law. Stanford took a step back. He held up his hands. Now hold on, Darnell. It is a misunderstanding. I will call the developer. We can work this out. These lawyers always complicate things. Work it out, Darnell whispered. The words came out like a choke. But I already transferred the money, $200,000. I sent it to your escrow account yesterday, before we left for the airport. Saul looked at Darnell with pity. It was the kind of pity you give to a man who has just stepped off a cliff and does not know he is falling yet. If you sent money to Mr. Vance for a deposit on this land, I suggest you ask for it back immediately, Saul said, because Mr. Vance has no land to sell, and that escrow account likely does not belong to the developer. The room went cold. Darnell stood up. His chair fell backward with a crash. My money, Darnell said, his voice rising. My $200,000. Where is it, Stanford? Stanford wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. It is just a delay, son. The market is volatile. I had to move some funds around to cover old obligations. It is a bridge loan. I will pay you back, as soon as my other deal in Miami closes. Darnell's face crumbled. He realized the truth. There was no deal. There was no land. There was no Dubai luxury. There was only a hole, a $200,000 hole that he had dug by mortgaging his home. You spent it, Darnell screamed. You stole my money. I mortgaged this house. I trusted you, Stanford sneered. The mask finally slipped. The charming businessman vanished and the desperate grifter appeared. Do not take that tone with me, boy, Stanford shouted back. You think 200 grand buys you the right to bark at me? That money is gone. It went to pay my creditors so I could even get on that plane with you. You wanted the lifestyle, Darnell. You wanted to play with the big boys. Well, this is the price of admission. Darnell let out a sound that was not human. It was the howl of a wounded animal. He lunged across the table. He grabbed Stanford by the lapels of his linen suit. They crashed into the china cabinet. Plates shattered. Crystal glasses exploded. Kimberly ran into the room screaming, "Stop it! Stop it! You are hurting him!" Darnell punched Stanford in the face. It was a sloppy, desperate punch, but it connected. Stanford fell back, knocking over the table with the blueprints. Papers flew everywhere like confetti at a funeral. Give me my money back, Darnell sobbed, hitting the man he had worshipped for 10 years. You liar, you thief. Stanford clawed at Darnell's face, drawing blood. They rolled on the floor amidst the broken glass and the ruined contracts. Two men in expensive suits fighting like rats over a scrap of bread. I stood by the kitchen door and watched them destroy each other. I did not move. I did not call the police. I simply watched. Saul Cohen looked at me. He gave a small nod. He closed his briefcase. He stepped over the mess on the floor and walked out the front door. I turned around. I walked to the counter and poured myself a cup of coffee. I took a sip. It was hot and bitter, just the way I like it. Behind me, the sounds of violence continued. The screams, the accusations, the sound of a family shattering into a million pieces. I walked past them. I opened the door to the basement. I walked down the stairs into the cool, damp darkness. I sat on my cot. I could still hear the thumping from upstairs. It sounded like thunder. Darnell had lost his money. He had lost his idol. He had lost his dignity. And tomorrow when the sun rose, he would find out that he was about to lose his house too. I took another sip of coffee. I leaned back against the concrete wall. The trap was sprung. The rat was caught. Now all I had to do was wait for the cage to close. The morning after the brawl with Stanford, the house was filled with a silence that felt heavy enough to break bones. Stanford had locked himself in the guest suite, nursing his bruised ego and a bottle of expensive scotch. Darnell sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold coffee. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. His eyes were sunken and his hands shook with a subtle tremor that never seemed to stop. I moved around the kitchen quietly, wiping down counters and playing the part of the invisible servant. I knew what was coming. I had tracked the delivery status on my phone. The mail carrier was 2 blocks away. At 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. It was not the cheerful chime of a guest. It was the sharp, businesslike ring of a process server or a certified mail carrier. Darnell jumped in his seat. He looked at the door with terrified eyes. He knew that nothing good came to the door anymore. I walked to the foyer. Through the frosted glass, I saw the uniform of the postal worker. I opened the door. The woman held a thick, rigid envelope with a red stripe across the top. It was marked urgent. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Sign here, please, she said, holding out a digital pad. I signed my name. Alonzo Freeman, the tenant. I took the envelope. It felt heavy in my hands. It felt like Judgment Day. I walked back into the kitchen and placed it on the table right in front of Darnell. It is for you, I said. Darnell looked at the return address. Esther S. Justice, LLC. He flinched as if the paper had burned him. He reached out with a trembling hand and tore open the tab. He pulled out the document. It was 3 pages long. Legal bond paper, crisp and white. I turned my back to him and started scrubbing a pot in the sink, but I lowered the water pressure so I could hear every breath he took. I heard the paper rustle. I heard his breath hitch. Then I heard a sound that was half gasp and half sob. What is it? Kimberly asked. She had just walked into the kitchen wearing a silk robe and a face mask. She looked tired and irritable. Darnell did not answer. He just stared at the paper. His face went from gray to a sickly white. Read it, Kimberly snapped, snatching the paper from his hands. She scanned the document. Her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open. She dropped the letter onto the table as if it were contaminated. Foreclosure, she whispered. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Immediate foreclosure. Darnell put his head in his hands. It is the acceleration clause, he mumbled into his palms. They found out. They know I used the money for a speculative investment instead of home renovations. They are calling the loan. What does that mean? Kimberly screamed. Her voice cracked. What does calling the loan mean, Darnell? It means they want it all back, Darnell said, his voice muffled. All of it, the principal, the interest, and the penalty fees. $240,000. When Kimberly asked, Darnell looked up. His eyes were red and wet. 3 days. We have 72 hours to pay the full amount or they seize the house. The explosion happened instantly. Kimberly grabbed a ceramic fruit bowl from the center of the table and hurled it at the wall. It shattered just inches from Darnell's head, sending shards of pottery and bruised apples flying across the room. You idiot, she shrieked. You lied to me. You said this was a bridge loan. You said it was safe. You said we would be rich. Now you are telling me we are going to be homeless in 3 days. Darnell stood up, trying to defend himself. I did not know they would check. It was a hard money lender. They are supposed to be loose with the rules. Someone must have tipped them off. Kimberly grabbed him by the front of his shirt. She shook him violently. Her face mask was cracking, revealing the angry red skin underneath. Fix this, Darnell. You fix this right now. I am not living on the street. I am not moving back in with my mother. I have a reputation in this town. If I lose this house, I lose everything. Do you hear me? I stood by the sink watching them. It was like watching a play I had written myself. The panic, the blame, the violence. It was exactly what they deserved. They had treated people like disposable objects for years, and now they were realizing that they were the disposable ones. Darnell pushed her away. I will fix it, he shouted. I will get the money. I have contacts. I have friends. I am Darnell Freeman. People know me. He pulled out his phone. He started dialing. He put it on speaker because his hands were shaking too much to hold it to his ear. The first call was to a man named Mike, a fraternity brother who worked at a hedge fund. Hey, Mike, it is Darnell. Listen, buddy, I am in a bit of a jam. Cash flow issue, temporary. I need a short-term float. $250,000, I will pay 20% interest. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Mike spoke. His voice was cold and distant. I cannot help you, Darnell. I heard about what happened with Stanford. Word is out that you guys got taken for a ride, and frankly, I heard you are under investigation for fraud. Do not call me again. The line went dead. Darnell stared at the phone. Fraud. The word echoed in the kitchen. He dialed another number. Steve, a developer he had golfed with for years. Steve picked up. Darnell, I am going to stop you right there. Saul Cohen called me this morning. He represents the new owner of the Sunny Palms land. He mentioned that you might be looking for funds. He advised me to steer clear of your toxic debt. Sorry, pal. Strictly business. Click. Darnell dropped the phone onto the table. It slid across the surface and stopped right in front of me. I looked down at it. I looked at my son. Saul Cohen had done his job perfectly. He had poisoned the well. He had made sure that Darnell was radioactive in this town. No bank would touch him. No friend would lend to him. He was alone on an island and the water was rising fast. Kimberly let out a long, high-pitched wail. She sank to the floor amidst the broken pottery. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of rage. "We are finished," she cried. "We are going to lose the cars. We are going to lose the club membership. My friends will laugh at me." Darnell stood there paralyzed. He looked at his wife on the floor. He looked at the foreclosure notice on the table. Then he looked at me. For a second, I thought he was going to ask for help. I thought he was going to apologize. But the look in his eyes was not humility. It was something darker. It was the look of a trapped rat looking for a hole to chew through. He walked over to me. He stood very close. I could smell the stale sweat and fear on him. "Dad," he said softly. His voice was trembling, but there was a new edge to it. A desperate, dangerous edge. "Yes, Darnell," I said. "You still have the deed to the Oak Street rental, right? The house you and Mom bought in '82. I looked at him. I kept my face blank. That house was my first accomplishment. It was where we lived before we bought this place. It was full of memories of Esther. "Why do you ask?" I said. Darnell licked his lips. "It is paid off. It is free and clear. It is worth at least $300,000 in this market." I stepped back. "You want me to sell the rental?" "That is my retirement income, Darnell. That is the only thing I have left besides my pension." Darnell grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, painful. "We do not have a choice, Dad. If we do not pay this notice, they take this house. The big house. The one that matters. We have to sell the rental. Today. We can find a cash buyer. We can do a quick close." I pulled my arm away. "And where am I supposed to live if things go wrong?" "You live here," Darnell said, his voice rising. "You live in the basement. You are fine, but we need that money. You have to sign it over to me." Kimberly stopped crying. She looked up from the floor, her eyes lit up with hope. "The rental," she said. "Of course, that old shack. It is sitting on a double lot. Developers would kill for it." She stood up, wiping her tears. "Sell it, Alonzo. You owe us that much. You are living here rent-free. Well, almost rent-free. You need to contribute to the family survival." I looked at them. They were incredible. Even at the edge of the cliff, they were trying to push me off first to soften their landing. They wanted to take the last asset I had. They wanted to strip me bare to cover their own mistakes. "I cannot do that," I said slowly. "That house means too much to me." Darnell slammed his fist into the wall. He punched a hole right through the drywall. "Forget what it means," he screamed. "This is an emergency. Give me the key to your safety deposit box. The deed is in there, right?" I did not answer. Darnell laughed. A crazy, unhinged laugh. "You know what? I do not need the key. I have power of attorney. You signed it 5 years ago when you had your surgery. You never revoked it. I can go to the bank and drill that box open myself." He was right. I had signed a general power of attorney back then. I had trusted him with my life. I had forgotten to revoke it formally. But he did not know about the lien. He did not know that Esther S. Justice, LLC, had already placed a legal claim on that property preventing any sale. "I am going to the bank," Darnell said, grabbing his car keys. "I am going to get that deed. I am going to sell that house by noon, and I am going to save my life." He turned to Kimberly. "Call the realtor. Tell him we have a hot property on Oak Street. Cash only. Immediate possession." Kimberly nodded vigorously. "Go. Hurry." Darnell ran out the door. He did not look back at me. He did not care that he was stealing my past to pay for his future. He just ran. I stood in the kitchen listening to the roar of his engine as he sped away. Kimberly was already on the phone, putting on her fake, polite voice, talking to a realtor. I walked over to the table. I picked up the foreclosure notice. I folded it neatly. Then I walked to the basement door. I went down the stairs into the cool darkness. I sat on my cot and pulled out my phone. I dialed Saul Cohen. He picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Freeman," Saul said. "He is coming to the bank," I said. "He is going to try to access my safety deposit box. He thinks he can sell the Oak Street rental." Saul chuckled. It was a dry sound. "Well, he is in for a surprise. The lien was recorded yesterday, and I also flagged the power of attorney as contested based on elder abuse suspicions. The bank manager has been instructed to call the police if he tries to force entry." Good, I said. Alonzo Saul asked, his voice softening. Are you sure you want to let him go this far? He is going to walk into a wall. I looked at the concrete walls of my basement. I looked at the dust motes dancing in the single beam of light. He put me in a hole, Saul, I said. He tried to bury me. Now he is going to find out that he dug that hole for himself. Let him go to the bank. Let him try to sell what is not his. And when he fails, send the eviction team to the big house. I hung up the phone. I laid back on the pillow. I closed my eyes. I could imagine Darnell rushing into the bank, sweating and desperate, demanding access to my box. I could imagine the look on his face when the manager told him no. It was not revenge. It was education. And the tuition was very expensive. The sound of defeat is usually silent, but in my house it sounded like Darnell slamming the front door. He had returned from the bank empty-handed, just as I knew he would. The bank manager had refused him access to my safety deposit box. The police had been threatened. Darnell had fled the scene before he could be arrested for attempted fraud. Now he was back in the kitchen, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His shirt was soaked with sweat and his eyes were wild. Kimberly sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, probably looking for divorce lawyers or a place to hide her jewelry. The air was so thick with tension you could choke on it. I stood by the sink, washing vegetables for a dinner that nobody would eat. I was calm. My heart beat with the steady rhythm of a man who held all the aces while his opponents were bluffing with a pair of twos. Then the television in the living room changed everything. We had left the news on low volume, just background noise. But then the breaking news melody played. It was that urgent electronic sound that demands attention. The anchorwoman appeared on the screen. She was standing in front of a convenience store, a 7-Eleven. I recognized the store immediately. It was the one on the corner of 5th and Main, the one with the flickering neon sign, the one where Darnell bought his cigarettes, and the one where he had bought a certain lottery ticket for $2.50. Darnell stopped pacing. He looked at the TV. The reporter spoke with excitement. We are live at the 7-Eleven on 5th Avenue where lottery officials have confirmed the winning jackpot ticket was sold last week. The winner has come forward anonymously to claim the prize, but we know the purchase was made at this specific location on Saturday afternoon. The day before Father S. Day. Darnell froze. He stared at the screen, his mouth opened slightly. I saw the gears turning in his head. He was replaying that day. He walked into that store, he bought a pack of gum, he bought a bottle of water, and as an afterthought he bought a quick pick ticket. He threw it on the counter. He brought it home. He threw it across the table at me. Kimberly looked up from her phone. She looked at the TV, then she looked at Darnell. Saturday, she whispered. You went to that store on Saturday, Darnell. You bought the ticket there. Darnell's eyes widened. His breathing became shallow and fast. I bought it, he stammered. I bought it right there. I remember the clerk, the guy with the tattoo on his neck. I bought the ticket. He turned slowly to look at me. I stood by the sink, dripping water onto the floor. I kept my face expressionless. I did not smile. I did not frown. I just looked at him. You gave it to him, Kimberly screamed. She jumped up from her chair. You gave the ticket to your father. Darnell grabbed his hair with both hands. No, it cannot be. He would have told us. He would have said something. Kimberly ran over to him and shook him. Think Darnell. He has been acting strange all week. He has been calm, too calm. He signed the lease without fighting. He let you scream at him. He has been sitting in that basement like a king in exile. Why would he be so arrogant unless he knew something we did not? Darnell looked at me with a mixture of horror and greed. It was a look that made my stomach turn. He did not see his father. He saw a walking ATM. He saw his salvation. He has it, Darnell whispered. He has the ticket. Then he exploded. Give it to me, he roared. He lunged across the kitchen. He did not touch me, but he got so close I could feel the heat radiating off his body. Where is it, old man? Where is the ticket? I know you have it. I bought it. It is mine. I paid for it with my money. You are just holding it for me. I dried my hands on a towel. I moved deliberately slowly. I do not know what you are talking about, I said. You gave me a ticket. I checked it. It was a loser. I put it away. Liar, Darnell screamed. He spat the word at me. You are a liar. You are hoarding it. You want to see me suffer. You want to see me lose this house, and then you are going to cash it in and laugh at me. Kimberly grabbed a steak knife from the counter. She did not point it at me, but she held it tight, her knuckles white. Check his room, she hissed. It has to be downstairs. He keeps everything in that heavy suitcase, or that old Bible he reads. Go, Darnell. Tear that place apart. Darnell did not need to be told twice. He turned and ran for the basement door. He hit the stairs hard, stumbling in his haste. Kimberly followed him, kicking off her high heels so she could run faster. I followed them. I walked down the stairs one by one. I was not afraid. I had been waiting for this moment. I knew exactly what they would find because I had put it there. When I reached the bottom step, the destruction had already begun. Darnell had overturned my cot. The thin mattress was ripped open, stuffing spilling out onto the damp floor. He was throwing my clothes out of the cardboard boxes I used as a dresser. My shirts, my work pants, my underwear were flying through the air, landing in dirty puddles. Kimberly was attacking the workbench. She was sweeping jars of screws and nails onto the floor. Glass shattered, metal clattered against the concrete. "Where is it?" Darnell screamed, tearing the lining out of my suitcase. "Where did you hide it, you selfish old man?" I stood in the doorway watching them. They looked like demons. Greed had stripped away their humanity. They were foaming at the mouth, sweating, panting, destroying the only space I had left in the world. "Check the Bible," Kimberly yelled. "Old people always hide money in the Bible." Darnell saw my Bible sitting on a shelf. He grabbed it. He did not open it with reverence. He shook it upside down. He fanned the pages, violently tearing the thin paper. A folded piece of paper fell out. It fluttered to the ground, landing near his feet. Time seemed to stop. Darnell gasped. He dropped the Bible. He fell to his knees. He grabbed the piece of paper. It was a lottery ticket. A quick pick. It was wrinkled. It had a coffee stain on the corner. It looked exactly like the one he had given me. Kimberly dropped the jar she was holding. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is that the winner?" Darnell smoothed the ticket out on the concrete floor. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold it still. He pulled out his phone. He opened the lottery app, read the numbers Kimberly commanded, read them. Darnell looked at the phone, then at the ticket. 7, he said. "The ticket says 7. "Yes," Kimberly breathed. "Yes." 14, he said. "The ticket says 14. "Oh my God," Kimberly cried. She started to cry. "Oh my God, we are saved." 22, Darnell said. His voice was getting stronger. 22. I leaned against the doorframe. I crossed my arms. I watched them celebrate. I watched them plan their new life. I watched them spend the money they did not have. 35, Darnell read. Match. 41. Match. He looked at the last number, the Powerball. On his phone screen, the winning number was 9. He looked at the ticket in his hand. He stared at it. He squinted. He brought it closer to his face. The number on the ticket was 8. 8. One number off. One single digit. The difference between $15 million and 0. Darnell stopped breathing. He did not move. He froze like a statue of despair. What Kimberly asked. "What is it, Darnell?" "Read the last number." Darnell did not speak. He let out a low, guttural sound, a sound of pure agony. "It is an 8, he whispered. What Kimberly shrieked. "It is an 8, Darnell screamed. He slammed his fist into the concrete floor. He hit the floor again and again until his knuckles bled. "It is an 8. The winner is 9. It is a loser. It is a worthless piece of trash." He grabbed the ticket and crumpled it up. He threw it across the room. He grabbed the Bible and threw it against the wall. "You did this!" he screamed at me, turning his wild eyes in my direction. "You brought this bad luck into my house. You jinxed it. It is because of you. Everything bad that is happening is because of you." I looked at him calmly. "I told you it was a loser," I said. "I checked it days ago. You are the one who wanted to believe in a fantasy." Darnell stood up. He was breathing hard. He looked around the wrecked basement. He looked at the ripped mattress. He looked at the shattered glass. He looked at the poverty of the room. And then he looked at me. And he realized that I had seen him at his lowest. I had seen him beg. I had seen him cry. I had seen him destroy a Bible for money. The shame was too much for him. And shame, when unprocessed, turns into hatred. "Get out," he said. His voice was low and dangerous. I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "Get out of my house," Darnell roared. "Right now. I do not want to see your face. I do not want you breathing my air. You are evicted." "But the lease," I began. "To hell with the lease," Darnell shouted. "I am the landlord. I am kicking you out. Take your trash and get out." Kimberly chimed in, her face twisted with spite. We are going to sell everything down here. The tools, the cot, that old record player. We need every dollar. We can get maybe $50 for this junk at a pawn shop. It is better than nothing. They were going to sell my tools, the tools I used to build the deck upstairs, the tools I used to fix Darnell's bicycle. They were going to sell my bed. They were willing to strip me naked to buy one more day of denial. I looked at Darnell one last time. I wanted to see if there was anything left of my son in there, any shred of decency, but there was nothing, just a hollow shell filled with greed and fear. Fine, I said. I will go. I did not pick up my clothes. I did not pick up my Bible. I just turned around and walked up the stairs. Where do you think you are going? Darnell yelled after me. You cannot leave your mess here. I did not answer. I walked through the kitchen. I walked out the front door. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that makes you glad to be alive. I walked down the driveway. I did not look back. I had placed the decoy ticket in the Bible that morning. The real ticket, the one with the number 9, had been cashed days ago. The money was sitting in the Esther S. Justice Trust Fund, safe and sound. Darnell had held the proof of his salvation in his hand, and he had thrown it away because he was blind. He was looking for a miracle on a piece of paper, but he missed the miracle of having a father who loved him enough to teach him a lesson. I reached the sidewalk. A black car was waiting for me. It was a Mercedes S-Class, tinted windows, shiny rims. The driver stepped out and opened the door. It was Saul Cohen. Ready for phase 2, Mr. Freeman Saul asked. I got in the car. The leather seats were soft. The air conditioning was cool. Drive, I said. And call the eviction team. Tell them the tenant has vacated the premises. It is time for the landlord to take possession. As the car pulled away, I looked at the house one last time. I saw Darnell watching me from the window. He looked confused. He did not understand why a black luxury car was picking up his broke father. He would understand soon enough. The lesson was just beginning. The sky turned dark gray in the middle of the afternoon, matching the color of the concrete driveway I poured 20 years ago. The rain started as a drizzle, but quickly turned into a deluge. It was a cold, hard rain, the kind that soaks through your clothes in seconds and chills you to the bone. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the freeze inside the house. I stood in the foyer watching Kimberly march back and forth like a general in a losing war. She was hysterical. The foreclosure notice was still sitting on the kitchen table like a tombstone. The failed attempt to sell the rental property had broken her spirit, and now she was looking for something to punish. She could not punish the bank. She could not punish the economy, so she decided to punish the only person she felt was beneath her. Me. She grabbed a black plastic garbage bag from the hallway closet. It was one of the bags I had packed my clothes in when they moved me to the basement. She did not drag it. She did not carry it. She swung it. She opened the front door and threw the bag out into the rain. It landed with a wet thud on the driveway. The plastic ripped open on the rough concrete. My clothes spilled out into a muddy puddle. My blue work shirts, the sweater Esther knitted for me, my good Sunday trousers, all of them soaking up the dirty water. I watched my life being treated like refuse. I did not move to stop her. I did not raise my voice. I just watched. Kimberly turned to me, breathing hard. Her hair was a mess and her eyes were wild. "Get out!" she screamed. Her voice cracked with the strain. "Get out of this house, Alonzo. We are done. We are finished." She pointed a shaking finger at the open door. "Do you think we can afford to feed you?" she yelled. "Do you think we can afford your electricity and your water and your medicine? We are losing everything. The bank is coming in 3 days. We need to save every penny. We cannot carry dead weight anymore." Dead weight. That is what she called the man who paid for the roof she was standing under. I looked past her to the living room. Darnell was standing there. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He was looking at the floor. He refused to make eye contact. He was letting his wife do the dirty work because he was too much of a coward to look his father in the eye and pull the trigger himself. I walked over to the door. The wind blew rain into the hallway, soaking the expensive hardwood floor. I stepped out onto the porch. The water hit my face. It felt shocking, but it also felt clean. It washed away the smell of the basement. It washed away the smell of their greed. I walked down the steps into the storm. I knelt down in the mud and started gathering my clothes. I picked up the sweater Esther made. It was heavy with water and ruined. I squeezed it tight. I felt the wool compress in my hand. It felt like I was squeezing the last bit of hope out of my relationship with my son. Kimberly stood in the doorway watching me with a look of pure disgust. "Go to a shelter," she shouted over the sound of the rain. Go to the government. You are old. They have places for people like you. Just do not come back here. We do not want you. I stood up. I held the wet bundle of clothes in my arms. I looked up at the house. My house. The house where I had carried Darnell over the threshold when he was a baby. The house where I had nursed Esther when she got sick. Every brick held a memory. Every window held a story. And now they were kicking me out of my own history. I looked at Darnell. He had moved closer to the door drawn by the spectacle. He was standing behind Kimberly, peering out at me through the rain. I looked straight at him. I locked my eyes onto his. Darnell, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the sound of the storm. He looked up. He flinched when he saw my face. He expected anger. He expected tears. He did not expect the calm resolve of a man who has already won the war. Are you sure about this, son? I asked. The question hung in the wet air. It was his last chance. It was the final exit ramp on the highway to destruction. All he had to do was step out onto that porch. All he had to do was say, Dad, come back inside. All he had to do was be a human being. Darnell looked at me. Then he looked at Kimberly. He saw the rage in her face. He saw the fear of poverty in her eyes. He did the math in his head. He calculated that getting rid of me would save him a few $100s a month. He looked back at me. His face hardened. He turned his head away. He looked at the wall. He chose his side. He reached out and grabbed the door handle. Just go, Dad, he mumbled. Just go. He slammed the door. The sound echoed in the neighborhood. I heard the lock turn, then the deadbolt, then the chain. I was locked out. I stood there in the driveway for a moment. The rain was coming down harder now. I was soaked to the skin. My shoes were filled with water. I should have been shivering. I should have been devastated. But I felt a strange warmth spreading through my chest. It was the warmth of liberation. The final shackle had been broken. The last tie of blood and obligation had been severed by their own hands. I owed them nothing. Not a dollar. Not a kind word. Not a single ounce of mercy. I dropped the bundle of wet clothes. I let them fall back into the mud. I did not need them. Those were the clothes of Alonzo, the victim. Alonzo, the tenant. Alonzo, the doormat. I reached into my pocket. My phone was in a waterproof case. I pulled it out. I dialed a single number. It rang once. I am ready, I said into the phone. Saul Cohen answered immediately. His voice was sharp and professional. Are you clear of the house? Saul asked. I am standing in the driveway, I said. They threw me out. It is done. I am sorry, Alonzo, Saul said softly. I know you hoped it would not end this way. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the dark windows. Do not be sorry, I said. Clarity is expensive, Saul, but it is worth every penny. Come and get me. And start phase 2. Understood, Saul said. We are 2 minutes away. I hung up. I walked to the end of the driveway. I stood by the mailbox. I wiped the rain from my face. Across the street, I saw a curtain twitch. Mrs. Higgins was watching. She was the neighborhood gossip. She saw everything. She saw the old man being kicked out in the storm. She saw the clothes in the mud. By tomorrow morning, the whole church congregation would know what Darnell Freeman had done to his father, but they were about to see something else. I heard the hum of an engine. It was a deep, powerful purr. A car turned the corner. It was not a taxi. It was not a bus. It was a black Maybach S-Class, long, sleek, shining even in the rain. Its windows were tinted so dark they looked like black mirrors. It moved through the puddles with the grace of a shark. The car slowed down and stopped right in front of me. The neighbor's curtain twitched again. I could feel Mrs. Higgins pressing her face against the glass. She had never seen a car like this on our street. Nobody had. This was a car for billionaires, a car for people who owned the world. The driver's door opened. A large man in a dark suit stepped out. He held a large black umbrella. He walked around the car, ignoring the rain. He walked up to me and held the umbrella over my head. Mr. Freeman, he said. His voice was deep and respectful. I nodded. Thank you, James. He opened the rear door for me. The interior was cream-colored leather. It smelled of new money and silence. It was warm. I paused before getting in. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw Darnell peering through the blinds of the living room window. I saw his eyes widen. I saw his jaw drop. He was looking at the car. He was looking at the driver. He was looking at his father, the man he thought was a beggar about to step into a chariot of gold. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply turned my back on him. I stepped into the car. The leather seat welcomed me. James closed the door with a solid, heavy thunk that shut out the rain and the noise and the misery of my former life. I sat back. I watched the rain streak against the tinted glass. "Drive, James," I said. "Where to, sir?" James asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "Take me to the hotel," I said. "The presidential suite. I need a hot shower and a bottle of vintage wine, and then take me to the Lawyer S office. I have a foreclosure to expedite." The car pulled away from the curb. We glided down the street past the neighbors' houses, past the corner store, past the life I used to live. I left my wet clothes in the mud. I left my son in the house he was about to lose. I left Alonzo, the victim, behind. The man sitting in the back of the Maybach was someone new, someone dangerous, someone with $15 million and a heart of steel. Phase 2 had begun, and God have mercy on anyone who stood in my way, because I certainly would not. The deadline had arrived. 72 hours had passed since the foreclosure notice landed on the kitchen table like a grenade. I was not there to see the final panic, but I heard about it later from James, my driver, who had friends on the eviction team. The scene at the house was chaotic. It was the kind of public spectacle that Kimberly feared more than death itself. A large moving truck was parked in the driveway, blocking Darnell's leased BMW. Men in blue uniforms were marching in and out of the front door carrying furniture. The neighbors were all out on their lawns. Mrs. Higgins had brought a lawn chair to the edge of her sidewalk. She was drinking iced tea and watching the fall of the House of Freeman like it was a daytime soap opera. Stanford Vance was there too. He had not come to help, he had come to scavenge. He was standing by his car shouting at Darnell. He was demanding repayment for the hotel bill and the emotional distress of the Dubai incident. He looked ridiculous. His face was red, and he was waving a cane that he did not need. Darnell was sitting on the front steps with his head in his hands. He looked broken. He was watching strangers carry out the sofa he had bought on credit. He was watching his life being dismantled piece by piece. Kimberly was screaming at a police officer trying to explain that this was all a misunderstanding, but the officer just shook his head and pointed to the clipboard. The eviction order was signed by a judge. It was final. Then the noise stopped. It started as a rumble, a deep vibration that could be felt in the chest. The neighbors turned their heads. The movers stopped carrying boxes. Darnell looked up from his hands. A convoy of black vehicles turned onto the street. There were 3 of them. 2 black SUVs flanking a long, sleek Maybach sedan. They moved in perfect formation. They did not look like cars. They looked like land sharks patrolling the asphalt. The sun glinted off their polished black paint. They moved slowly, purposefully. They glided past Mrs. Higgins, who lowered her iced tea in shock. They glided past the moving truck. They pulled up right in front of the house. The silence on the street was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The doors of the SUVs opened first. 4 men in dark suits stepped out. They were large men with earpieces and stone faces. They took up positions around the Maybach. They scanned the crowd. They looked at Stanford, who suddenly stopped shouting and took a step back. Then James walked around to the rear passenger door of the Maybach. He moved with a crisp, professional efficiency. He opened the door. I stepped out. I was not wearing my stained coveralls. I was not wearing my old flannel shirt. I was wearing a bespoke Italian suit made of midnight blue wool. It was cut to fit me perfectly, hiding the stoop in my back and accentuating the breadth of my shoulders. My shoes were crocodile skin polished to a mirror shine. On my wrist, I wore a gold watch that cost more than Darnell's car. I wore sunglasses that hid my eyes. I held a silver-headed cane not because I needed it, but because it was a scepter. I stood on the sidewalk and adjusted my cuffs. I took a deep breath of the air. It smelled of freshly cut grass and impending justice. Darnell stood up. He squinted at me. He did not recognize me at first. He saw a wealthy man, a powerful man, a stranger. Then I took off my sunglasses. Darnell's knees buckled. He grabbed the railing of the porch to stay upright. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Dad," he whispered. It was a faint sound carried by the wind. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Stanford dropped his cane. It clattered loudly on the driveway. He stared at me with his mouth hanging open. The cigar fell from his fingers and rolled into a puddle, sizzling out. I did not answer Darnell. I did not look at Stanford. I looked at the house. My house. Saul Cohen stepped out of the first SUV. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He walked up to me and stood by my side. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the police officer. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," Saul announced, his voice booming across the lawn. "Please halt the eviction process immediately." The head mover put down a lamp. "Who says?" he asked. "We have a court order. You have an order to evict Darnell Freeman." "And Kimberly Freeman," Saul said calmly. "That order stands, but the property itself is not to be vacated. It is simply changing hands." Darnell stumbled down the steps. He walked toward me like a sleepwalker. "Dad," he said again, louder this time. "Dad, whose cars are these? Where did you get that suit? What is going on?" Saul stepped in front of Darnell, blocking his path. He held up a hand. "Mr. Freeman, please step back." Darnell looked at Saul, then at me. He looked confused, terrified, and angry all at once. "He is my father," Darnell shouted, pointing at me. "Let me talk to him. Dad, tell them to stop. Tell them this is crazy." Saul opened his portfolio. He pulled out a document with a gold seal. "Correction," Saul said. "He is not just your father. Allow me to introduce you to the chairman of Esther S. Justice, LLC, the entity that purchased your debt, the entity that owns the Sunny Palms development, and as of this morning, the legal owner of this property." Saul gestured to me with a flourish. "Meet your landlord, Mr. Alonzo Freeman." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Kimberly, who had been standing near the door, let out a short, sharp gasp. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She collapsed onto the porch in a heap of silk and denial. Whether it was real or theatrical, I did not care. Nobody moved to help her. They were too busy staring at me. Stanford looked like he was having a stroke. His face turned a deep purple. He clutched his chest. "You," he wheezed. "You are the LLC. You are the investor." I tapped my cane on the pavement. The sound was sharp and authoritative. "Hello, Stanford," I said. My voice was smooth and rich. "I heard you had some trouble in Dubai. I hope the flight back was comfortable. Coach can be so cramped for a man of your stature." Stanford sputtered. You froze my card. You bought the land. You ruined me." I smiled. It was a cold smile. "I did not ruin you, Stanford. I just stopped paying for your lies. There is a difference." Darnell was shaking his head back and forth. No. It is impossible. You are broke. You have nothing. I saw your bank account. It had $12 in it. I walked toward him. The security guards parted to let me through. I stopped inches from his face. I could see the sweat on his forehead. I could see the panic in his eyes. "You saw what I wanted you to see, Darnell," I said softly. "You saw a weak old man because that is what you wanted to see. You never looked closer. You never looked at the lottery ticket. You never looked at the man who raised you. You only looked at what you could take from me." Darnell grabbed my lapels. His hands were dirty from moving boxes. "The ticket," he gasped. "The number 8. It was a loser. I saw it." I gently removed his hands from my suit. I dusted off the spot where he had touched me. "You saw a decoy," I said, "a test, and you failed it. You failed it spectacularly. The real ticket was cashed days ago. $15 million, Darnell. That is what loyalty costs these days, apparently." Darnell fell to his knees on the sidewalk. He looked up at me. Tears streamed down his face. $15 million, he sobbed. "Dad, please. I am your son. I made a mistake. We can fix this. Just tell them to stop. Tell them to put the furniture back." I looked down at him. I felt a twinge of sadness, but I crushed it. Sadness was a luxury I could not afford right now. "The furniture stays on the truck," I said. "It is not my taste. I prefer something more classic." I walked past him. I walked up the steps past Kimberly's unconscious body. I walked to the front door. The police officer stepped aside. He tipped his hat to me. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. "Good afternoon, officer," I replied. "Thank you for your service." I stepped into the foyer. It was empty. The echoes of the movers' boots were still in the air. The house felt stripped and barren, but it also felt clean. The energy of Darnell and Kimberly was gone, replaced by the vacuum of their departure. I walked into the living room. There was only one piece of furniture left. It was the large wingback chair that stood by the fireplace. The chair that Stanford Vance always sat in. The chair he claimed as his throne whenever he visited. The movers had not taken it yet. I walked over to it. I ran my hand along the velvet fabric. I turned around and sat down. It was comfortable. I crossed my legs. I rested my hands on the head of my cane. I looked out the large bay window. Outside, I could see the scene unfolding. Darnell was still on his knees weeping. Stanford was shouting at Saul Cohen, who was calmly handing him a restraining order. The neighbors were taking photos with their phones. It was a tragedy. It was a comedy. It was the end of an era. James walked into the room. He carried a bottle of vintage cognac and a single crystal glass. He placed them on the mantelpiece. "Will there be anything else?" Mr. Freeman James asked. I poured myself a drink. I swirled the amber liquid in the glass. "No, James," I said. "Just leave the door open. I want them to see." "See what, sir?" I took a sip of the cognac. It burned pleasantly in my throat. "I want them to see the master of the house sitting in his chair," I said. "I want them to see what respect looks like." I looked out the window again. I locked eyes with Stanford Vance. He stopped shouting. He looked at me sitting in his spot, drinking his drink, owning his world. He looked small. He looked defeated. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Stanford turned away and shuffled toward his car. He looked old. I sat back in the chair. The house was quiet around me. It was finally mine, not just on paper, but in spirit. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my space. And I had done it without raising my voice. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The silence of victory. The silence of justice. The silence of a man who finally knows his worth. The silence in the living room did not last long. Desperation has a very specific sound. It is the sound of pride breaking like a dry twig under a heavy boot. I sat in the velvet wingback chair sipping my cognac and watching the show begin. It was grotesque. It was pathetic. And it was exactly what I expected. Kimberly was the first to break character. She had been lying on the porch in a heap of dramatic fainting, but the moment she realized that nobody was coming to carry her, she experienced a miraculous recovery. She crawled through the open front door. Her makeup was smeared and her silk dress was stained with mud from the garden. She looked at me sitting in the chair. She looked at the expensive suit. She looked at the security guards standing like statues by the wall. And she did the math. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward me. She threw herself on the floor at my feet. She wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face in my Italian wool trousers. "Dad," she wailed. Her voice was thick with fake tears. "Oh, Dad, I am so sorry. You have to believe me. It was not my idea." I looked down at the top of her head. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just a mild annoyance that she was wrinkling my suit. "Get off me, Kimberly," I said calmly. She clung tighter. "No, Dad, please listen. It was Darnell. He forced me to treat you that way. He told me you were a burden. He told me we had to be tough on you. I wanted to let you stay upstairs. I wanted to cook for you. But I was afraid of him. He is so controlling. I have always loved you like my own father." I pulled my leg away from her grip. I stood up and brushed off my pants. "You loved me," I repeated flatly. "Is that why you threw my clothes in the mud 30 minutes ago? Is that why you told me to go to a homeless shelter? Is that why you called me dead weight?" Kimberly sobbed louder. I was stressed. I was having a breakdown. I did not mean it. "Please, Dad, do not kick us out. I will take care of you. I will be the best daughter in the world. We can use the money to fix the family. We can go on trips, just you and me." She was already plotting. She was already trying to cut Darnell out of the picture to secure her own survival. She was a survivor, I would give her that. But she was a parasite. And I had just fumigated the house. Before I could answer, Darnell stormed into the room. He had stopped crying. His sadness had been replaced by a sudden manic realization. He marched right up to me, ignoring his wife on the floor. His eyes were wide and greedy. "Wait a minute," he said, pointing a finger at my chest. "Wait just a minute." He looked at Saul Cohen, who was standing by the fireplace. "You said he won $15 million, Darnell said. You said he cashed the ticket." Saul nodded slowly. "That is correct. The funds are secured in the trust." Darnell let out a loud laugh. It sounded like a bark. "Then he cannot kick me out," he said triumphantly. "In fact, he owes me money, $7.5 million to be exact." He turned to me with a smirk. "That ticket was mine. Dad, I bought it. I paid for it with my own money. I have the bank statement to prove I made a purchase at that 7-Eleven. You were just holding it. Legally, that creates a constructive trust. It is joint property. You cannot just take my ticket and claim the whole prize. I will sue you. I will tie this up in court for years. I looked at my son. I looked at the delusion in his eyes. He really believed he could talk his way out of this. He thought the law was a magic spell he could cast to undo his mistakes. Saul Cohen stepped forward. He opened his portfolio. Actually, Mr. Freeman Saul said, his voice dripping with legal disdain. The law is quite clear on gifts. Once a gift is delivered and accepted, the transfer of ownership is complete. You gave the ticket to your father. You physically handed it to him. You verbally expressed the intent of the gift. You said, "Good luck, Pop." We have witness testimony from your wife who made a joke about it. And we have the physical possession. Darnell turned purple. But I did not know it was a winner, he shouted. If I knew it was a winner, I would never have given it to him. That makes the gift invalid. It was a mistake of fact. I laughed. I could not help it. The sound echoed in the empty room. You gave me $2.50, Darnell, I said. That was the value you placed on me. You threw it across the table like you were tipping a waiter. You did not give me a chance at millions. You gave me your spare change. And now that the spare change turned into gold, you want it back. That is not how life works, son. You cannot demand a refund on generosity you never intended to show. Darnell sputtered. He looked around for support. He looked at Stanford Vance, who had shuffled into the room behind him. Stanford, tell him, Darnell pleaded. You know business. Tell him he has to share. Stanford Vance was a chameleon. He saw the way the wind was blowing. He saw that Darnell was a sinking ship. He adjusted his wrinkled jacket and smoothed his hair. He put on his best salesman's smile. He walked toward me with his hand extended, ignoring Darnell completely. Alonzo, he said, his voice booming with false warmth. Let us all take a breath here. Emotions are running high. We are family after all. I looked at his hand. I did not shake it. Stanford lowered his hand, but kept smiling. Look, Alonzo, I admit things got out of hand. Misunderstandings happen. But you are a wealthy man now. Wealth brings complexity. You need guidance. You need someone who knows how to navigate the world of high finance. Darnell is young and foolish, but I have experience. I can help you manage that trust. I know some offshore opportunities that yield 20%. Let bygones be bygones. Let me be your portfolio manager. We can turn that $15 million into $50 million. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. The man who had tried to swindle my son with a fake land deal was now trying to swindle me. I looked at Saul. Saul nodded. He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. Stanford, I said softly. Do you know what the FBI does with people who sell securities for land they do not own? Stanford's smile faltered. What? I pointed to the envelope in Saul's hand. We did a little digging. Stanford. It turns out Sunny Palms was not your only project. There was a condo development in Florida, a resort in Mexico, all phantom projects, all Ponzi schemes. You have been robbing Peter to pay Paul for a decade. And you were about to use Darnell's mortgage money to pay off a very angry investor in Chicago. Stanford's face turned the color of old oatmeal. That is slander, he whispered. It is a federal indictment, I said. Or it will be in about an hour. My lawyers have already forwarded the evidence packet to the FBI field office. They are very interested in your travel records, especially that trip to Dubai. Flight risk is the term they used. Stanford started to back away. His hands were shaking. You are bluffing, he said. I checked my watch. The agents should be arriving any minute. If I were you, Stanford, I would call a lawyer. A criminal defense lawyer. Not a financial planner. Stanford Vance did not say another word. He turned and ran. He ran out of the house faster than a man his age should be able to move. He scrambled into his car and sped away, leaving tire marks on the driveway. He was running from a ghost he could not escape. I turned back to the couple on the floor. Kimberly was staring at the door where her father had just fled. She realized she was alone. Her protector was a fraud. Her husband was a failure. Kimberly, I said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide with fear. You have 10 minutes, I said. 10 minutes for what, she whispered. To pack, I said. You can take your clothes. You can take your personal toiletries. But you cannot take anything that was purchased with funds from the joint account I shared with Darnell. No jewelry, no designer bags, no electronics, and definitely not the silverware. But that is everything, she cried. That is the point, I said. You came into this family with nothing, Kimberly, and you treated me like nothing, so you will leave with exactly what you deserve. I signaled to the security guards. Escort her upstairs, I said. Make sure she only packs essentials. If she touches a Louis Vuitton bag, confiscate it. Kimberly stood up. She looked at Darnell, hoping he would fight for her. But Darnell was staring at the floor, lost in his own nightmare. You are a monster, Kimberly spat at me. I hope you die alone in this big empty house. I smiled. I would rather die alone in a palace than live with a snake in a basement. Goodbye, Kimberly. She was led away, screaming and cursing. Her voice faded as she was dragged up the stairs. The room was quiet again. It was just me and Darnell. He stood in the center of the room. He looked small. He looked like the little boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. But the monster was not under the bed anymore. The monster was in the mirror. I stood up from the wingback chair. I walked over to the fireplace. I looked at the photo on the mantle. It was a picture of me, Esther, and Darnell on his graduation day. We looked so happy. I picked up the photo. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I placed it face down. I turned to face my son. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. His lip was trembling. Dad, he whispered. I did not answer immediately. I let the silence stretch. I let the weight of his actions crush him. We are not done, Darnell, I said. He flinched. I have one more thing to give you, I said. I reached into the pocket of my Italian suit. My fingers brushed against the cool, crisp paper of the money I had prepared. Darnell watched my hand. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. He thought maybe, just maybe, I was going to give him some cash. Maybe a few thousand. Maybe enough to get a hotel. I pulled my hand out. I held it out to him. Darnell looked at my palm. He stared. And then he understood. And the sound of his heart breaking was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The room was so quiet that I could hear the sound of Darnell breathing. It was a shallow and ragged sound, like a lung that had forgotten how to take in air. He stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the empty spaces where his furniture used to be. He was looking at my hand. His eyes were locked onto my clenched fist. I could see the desperate hope burning in his gaze, even after everything that had happened, even after the eviction, even after the lies were exposed. He still believed that there was a check in my hand. He still believed that I was his father, and that a father is biologically programmed to save his son no matter how toxic the son has become. He was wrong. I looked at him and I did not see the 32-year-old man in the expensive suit. I saw the ghost of every sacrifice I had ever made for him. I saw the double shifts at the foundry when the heat was so bad my boots melted to the floor. I saw the vacations I never took so I could put money in his college fund. I saw the car I drove for 20 years so he could have a safe vehicle for high school. I saw the retirement I postponed. I saw the love I poured into him like concrete into a foundation, hoping it would set strong and true. But the foundation had cracked. The concrete was full of sand. I slowly opened my hand. Darnell leaned forward. His eyes widened. I did not hold a check. I did not hold a key to a new car. I did not hold a deed. In my palm lay 2 crumpled $1 bills and 2 quarters. $2.50. I looked at the money. Then I looked at Darnell. Do you recognize this? I asked. My voice was soft, but it filled the room like smoke. Darnell stared at the money. He blinked rapidly. He looked confused. It is cash, he whispered. It is the price of a father, I said. I took a step closer to him. This is exactly what you gave me on Father's Day, Darnell. You walked into a gas station and you bought a lottery ticket. You did not buy it because you wanted me to win. You bought it because it was the cheapest thing on the counter. You threw it at me like you were tossing a bone to a stray dog. You laughed when you gave it to me. You and Kimberly stood right there on that patio, and you laughed at the old man and his worthless piece of paper. Darnell shook his head. No, Dad. It was a gift. It was a chance. It was an insult, I said, cutting him off. You valued our relationship at $2.50. That was the budget you set for my dignity. That was the appraisal value of my love. You spent $20,000 on a stranger because you wanted his approval, but for the man who wiped your nose and paid for your education, you could not even spare the price of a cup of coffee. I let the bills fall from my hand. They fluttered to the floor. The green paper landed silently on the hardwood. Then I dropped the quarters. Clink, clink. The sound of the metal hitting the wood was sharp and final. It sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. Darnell looked at the money on the floor. He looked at me. His face was pale. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I am settling the estate," I said. "I am giving you your inheritance, Darnell." He looked up at me with sudden shock. "Inheritance." I nodded. "You wanted money. You wanted what was mine. You tried to sell my rental property. You tried to steal my savings. You mortgaged my home. You were so desperate to get your hands on my legacy that you almost destroyed us both. Well, here it is." I pointed to the floor. "There is your inheritance. $2.50. Pick it up." Darnell took a step back. "You are joking. You have $15 million. You cannot leave me with nothing. I am your son. I am your flesh and blood." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Blood is biology, Darnell. Family is behavior. And your behavior has been bankrupt for a long time. You are right. I have $15 million. It is sitting in the Esther's Justice Trust Fund right now. And do you know what I'm going to do with it?" Darnell licked his lips. He looked hopeful again. Just for a second. "We can invest it," he said quickly. "We can start over, Dad. I learned my lesson, I swear. We can build an empire." I shook my head. "No. We are not building anything. I am building something." I turned to Saul Cohen. "Tell him, Saul." Saul stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Darnell with professional indifference. "Mr. Freeman has instructed me to draft the bylaws for a new charitable organization," Saul said. "The entire corpus of the trust minus a small living stipend for Mr. Freeman is being donated to establish the Esther Freeman Center for Elder Justice." Darnell froze. "What is that?" "It is a sanctuary," I said. "It is a legal defense fund and a housing complex for elderly people who have been abused, exploited, or abandoned by their greedy children. We are going to use my money to fight people like you, Darnell. We are going to hire the best lawyers in the country to sue children who steal their parents' deeds. We are going to build safe homes for grandmothers who were kicked out of their own basements. Every single penny of that $15 million is going to be a weapon to protect the dignity of the old." Darnell staring at me. His mouth hung open. His brain was trying to process the magnitude of his loss. "You are giving it away," he whispered. "You are giving my money to strangers." "It was never your money," I roared, my voice finally breaking the calm facade. "It was never yours. It was mine. It was my sweat. It was my luck. It was my blessing. And you are not a victim, Darnell. You are a predator, and I will not feed a predator." Darnell looked at the floor. He looked at the $2.50. The reality hit him. The realization that he was not just broke, but that he had been actively written out of the book of life. The shock turned into something else. It turned into a dark, ugly rage. His face twisted. His eyes bulged. The mask of the civilized businessman fell away completely, and the violent child appeared. "You old fool!" he screamed. He lunged at me. He moved fast. His hands were curled into claws. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the truth I had just spoken. He wanted to tear the suit off my body and reclaim the power he felt he had lost. I did not flinch. I did not move. Because I did not have to. James, the head of my security detail, moved faster than any human I had ever seen. He stepped in front of me like a wall of black granite. Darnell collided with James. It was like a bicycle hitting a freight train. Darnell grunted as the wind was knocked out of him. James grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and the belt of his trousers. He lifted him off the ground. My son, my 32-year-old son, dangled there like an unruly toddler. "Let me go," Darnell screamed, kicking his legs. "Let me at him. He is crazy. That money is mine. He is stealing my birthright." James looked at me for instructions. I looked at Darnell. I looked at the hate in his eyes. "Take the trash out, James," I said coldly, "and make sure he takes his inheritance." James marched toward the front door carrying Darnell effortlessly. "Wait!" Darnell shouted. "Dad, wait! I am sorry. I did not mean it. Please don't do this. I have nowhere to go." Kimberly took the car keys. "Dad, please." I turned my back on him. I looked at the fireplace. I listened to his voice fading as he was carried through the foyer. I heard the front door open. I heard the sound of Darnell landing on the pavement. I heard him screaming at Stanford and Kimberly, who were likely standing by the curb waiting for a miracle that had just been canceled. And then I heard the heavy thud of the oak door closing. Click. The lock engaged. The screaming was cut off instantly. The house was sealed. I stood there in the silence. My heart was beating fast, but it was a steady rhythm. I looked down at the floor. The $2.50 were still there. Darnell had been thrown out, but he had left his inheritance behind. He was too proud or too stupid to pick it up. I slowly knelt down. My knees cracked a little, but the pain was manageable. I reached out and picked up the $2 bills. I picked up the quarters. I held them in my hand. They felt cold. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out. I saw Darnell standing on the sidewalk. His shirt was torn. He was shouting at the house, shaking his fist. Mrs. Higgins was standing on her porch filming him with her phone. The neighborhood was watching the final act of his disgrace. He was alone. He had no wife. He had no father-in-law. He had no father. And he had no money. He had started the week trying to fly to Dubai in first class, and he was ending it standing on the curb without enough money for a bus ticket. I turned away from the window. I walked back to the velvet chair. James walked back into the room. He adjusted his jacket. He was not even out of breath. "The perimeter is secure, Mr. Freeman," James said. "The local police have been notified of a disturbance. They are on their way to remove the individuals from the sidewalk." "Thank you, James," I said. I looked at the money in my hand one last time. "James," I said. "Yes, sir." "Take this," I said, handing him the $2.50. James took the money. He looked at it with a puzzled expression. "What do you want me to do with this, sir?" he asked. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes. "Buy a lottery ticket," I said. James paused. "A lottery ticket, sir?" "Yes," I said. "A quick pick." "And if you win, James, promise me one thing." "Anything, sir." "Promise me you will never give it to someone who does not respect you," I said. James smiled. A small, genuine smile. "I promise, sir." He put the money in his pocket and walked out of the room. I was alone. The house was big and empty, but for the first time in years it did not feel lonely. It felt clean. It felt quiet. I took a deep breath. I could smell the future. It smelled like freedom. I had paid a high price for this peace. I had lost a son. But I had found myself. And as I sat there listening to the silence, I realized that $15 million was a lot of money, but the silence was priceless. I reached for my glass of cognac. I took a sip. To Esther, I whispered to the empty room, "Justice has been served." And outside, the sun began to set on the old life of Alonzo Freeman, and the stars began to come out for the new one. 30,000 feet is a beautiful place to be, especially when you are sitting in a seat that turns into a bed and drinking a glass of Dom Perignon that costs more than my old monthly electric bill. I looked out the window at the clouds. They looked like piles of white cotton. From up here, the world looks clean. It looks organized. It looks peaceful. It is a stark contrast to the mud and the noise of the life I left behind just 4 weeks ago. I am not alone in this cabin. Across the aisle is Mrs. Higgins. She's wearing a silk scarf and laughing at a movie on her screen. Behind me is Mr. Henderson, a retired veteran who is about to be evicted from his apartment because his pension check was late. Next to him is Sarah, a grandmother who was abandoned by her children in a state facility. We are the inaugural members of the Esther Freeman Traveling Club. We are flying to Dubai. It is ironic, I know. This was the destination that started the war. This was the trip that Stanford Vance used to dangle in front of my son like a carrot. He wanted to come here to pretend he was a king. He wanted to take photos for Instagram and sneeze at poor people. We are going for a different reason. We are going because we can. We are going because for 80 years Mrs. Higgins has never left the state of Ohio, and she told me once that she wanted to see the desert before she died. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. My new life is simple. I live in a condo downtown. It has a doorman named Ralph who calls me Mr. Freeman and actually means it. I have a view of the river. I have a kitchen filled with food. And most importantly, I have a purpose. The Esther Freeman Center for Elder Justice is already making headlines. Saul Cohen has hired a team of 5 lawyers who are currently tearing through the court system. We have already saved 3 houses from foreclosure. We have recovered 2 stolen pensions. We are putting fear into the hearts of ungrateful children all over the city. Speaking of ungrateful children, I reached into the pocket of my seat and pulled out my tablet. Saul sends me a weekly briefing. I call it the Justice Report. I opened the file. Stanford Vance, the update was short. Bail denied. Flight risk. The FBI found evidence of wire fraud across 3 states. He is currently being held in the county detention center. He is sharing a cell with a man named Big Mike, who does not like it when people snore. Stanford snores very loudly. The trial is set for next year, but Saul tells me that with the mountain of evidence against him, Stanford will likely spend the rest of his life wearing orange jumpsuits instead of linen ones. He wanted to live on the state's dime, and now he is. Just not in the way he imagined. Kimberly. The update on her was predictable. She filed for divorce 3 days after the eviction. She cited irreconcilable differences, which is lawyer talk for he ran out of money. She moved 2 towns over and is currently dating a used car salesman who wears a lot of gold chains. She is looking for her next host. I almost feel sorry for the car salesman. Almost. And then there is Darnell. I swiped to the next page. There was no photo. Just a text update from the private investigator. Subject is currently employed at the Iron City Logistics Warehouse. I know that warehouse. I used to deliver steel there 40 years ago. It is a hot, dusty metal box where the air smells of diesel and sweat. Darnell is working the loading dock. He is a packer. His job is to lift 50-pound boxes of auto parts and stack them on pallets. He does this for 8 hours a day. He earns $15 an hour. The report says he is living in a rented room above a garage on the south side. He takes the bus to work because his leased BMW was repossessed the day after I took back the house. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I pictured Darnell as soft hands, the hands that had never done a day of hard labor in their lives, gripping rough cardboard. I pictured his back aching. I pictured him looking at the clock, waiting for a break that never seems to come. He is finally learning the lesson I tried to teach him when he was 16. He is learning that money weighs something. He is learning that $1 represents a piece of your life that you traded away. He is walking in my boots, literally. I left my old work boots in the garage. I hope he found them. He is going to need them. The flight attendant walked by. She was a kind woman with a bright smile. "More champagne, Mr. Freeman?" she asked. "Yes, please," I said. "And bring around for my friends. We are celebrating." "Celebrating what, sir?" she asked, pouring the golden liquid. "Freedom," I said. She smiled and walked away. I looked at the tablet again. There was one more detail in the report. Subject has attempted to contact the client 12 times in the last week via various public phones. I put the tablet away. I do not hate Darnell. Hate takes too much energy. Hate is a fire that burns the house down. I do not want to burn any more houses. I just want to live in mine. I feel indifferent. And that is a strange feeling for a father. I used to think that the cord between a parent and a child was unbreakable. I thought it was made of steel, but it is not. It is made of trust. And once trust is cut, you cannot tie the ends back together. You just end up with a knot. I felt a vibration in my pocket. My personal phone. I pulled it out. It was a brand new phone. Only a few people had the number. Saul, James, the doctors at the nursing home. But the number on the screen was not saved. It was a local area code. I stared at it. I knew who it was. Darnell must have borrowed a phone from a coworker, or maybe he used his last quarter at a payphone if those even exist anymore. I let it ring. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I could answer. I could pick up and hear his voice. I knew exactly what he would say. He would say he was sorry. He would say he was tired. He would say his back hurt. He would ask for a loan. Just a small one. Just enough to get back on his feet. He would appeal to my guilt. He would appeal to the memories of him as a little boy. He would try to sell me a ticket to a guilt trip I had already taken 1,000 times. I looked at Mrs. Higgins across the aisle. She was asleep now. She looked peaceful. She had worked as a maid for 50 years, and her son had stolen her pension to buy a sports car. Now she was flying first class. She deserved this peace. If I answered that phone, I would be inviting the chaos back in. I would be opening the door to the basement again. I looked at the screen. Accept. Decline. I did neither. I pressed the side button to silence the ringer. Then I tapped the number. I opened the menu. Block caller. Confirm. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. I placed the phone on the tray table. I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was the final brick falling from the wall I had carried for so long. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Dubai. The weather is sunny and 90 degrees. We hope you enjoy your stay. I looked out the window. Below me, the desert sand stretched out like a sea of gold. The city rose from the dunes like a mirage. It was a place of excess, a place of dreams. Stanford wanted to come here to be someone else. I am coming here to be myself. I picked up my glass. I raised it to the reflection in the window. I saw an old man with gray hair and a face lined with history. But I also saw a man who was smiling. I thought about the $2.50. I hope James won the lottery with it. But even if he did not, that money bought the most valuable thing in the world. It bought me the truth. Darnell was my son by biology. But family is not about who you share DNA with. Family is about who you share your table with. Family is about who holds the umbrella when it rains. Family is about respect. I took a sip of champagne. Blood is a necessary condition to be born, I whispered to the clouds. But kindness is the sufficient condition to be family. The plane banked left. The seatbelt sign turned on with a soft chime. I closed my eyes and prepared for landing. My name is Alonzo Freeman. I am 68 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I belong. The end. This journey taught me that a title like father or son means nothing without the actions to back it up. Darnell thought he could buy my silence with a cheap ticket, but he only bought his own destruction. I learned that you should never set yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially when they are the ones holding the match. True wealth is not the $15 million in the bank. It is the peace of mind that comes from knowing your value and refusing to let anyone discount it ever again. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. And tell me in the comments below, would you have forgiven Darnell, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I read every single comment.